Okay. But it should come, it's not coming up. Yeah, I can't see anything.
Well, good morning. Glad to see all your bodies. Can't see everybody's face. Glad to see everybody's smiling bodies. We'll put it that way. Welcome to our 43rd annual Llano County Beef and Range Field Day, guys, and just thank you for coming. Thank you for the opportunity to present you with some very good educational programming today. It's been a while, honestly, since we've all been able to get together. So we are very, very grateful for the opportunity, and we want to give a big thank you to Texas A&M AgriLife Extension for allowing us to go forward with this. We want to give a big thank you to Llano County, Judge Cunningham, for allowing us to do this. We also want to give a big thank you to the City of Llano and our Mayor, Ms. Mayor Lang, for allowing us to do this also. Without those guys, this wouldn't be happening. So we want to tell them thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for allowing this to happen. We do have it virtually, so you guys that are on the computer, thanks for coming, and we certainly are glad that you're here with us today also. Before we get started, I want Judge Cunningham to kind of give a little welcome and tell you thank you for coming.
Good morning, everybody. How many first-time visitors do we have? I've never seen pretty good turnout. I don't know how many we have online, but thank you for coming out. I know when we moved back to Llano, I actually grew up here and graduated high school here, and then when we moved back and bought some property, and I realized about 2 years into it that there were a lot of things that I could have done a lot better had I attended something like Jamie's putting on right now to help with the property. But it's a very beneficial event. We've got some outstanding county agents, and we're fortunate to have them, and we're grateful for all of you to be here. Thank you all also for wearing your mask and practicing the social distancing. We're not out of the woods yet of COVID-19, but we can take proper precautions and still get on with our life, and that's what we're going to try to do the best we can. There's a lot of information going to come out today. I hope you all take full advantage of everything that's out here. And thanks, Jamie, for inviting me, and we wish you all the best of luck today. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. I don't know how many of you know him, but he had one of our very best 4-H'ers to go through the program, and he is a tremendous supporter of ours, and we want to just tell you thank you for all that you do and all the support that you give us, and we're very grateful. All right, thanks, and we're getting ready to get rolling here in just a minute so we can kind of stay on time. As most of you know, this whole thing is a little bit different. So we've already had some challenges this morning, so just please bear with us. A lot of this is the first time for, maybe not for Travis Bell here, who is a part of our West Region beef cattle programming effort. Travis comes to us from Concho County, as you can tell, a lot younger than me, so he understands those little square boxes up there and how to play with them and how to make them work. So we want to tell you thank you for that. On the other end, on the computer end, our DEA, Marty Gibbs, and then our RPL, who's our regional program leader, Robert Pritz, is kind of handling the computer end of it for those of you that are online. So again, thank you to you guys. Thank you to the NRCS and our local Soil and Water Board for helping program and helping put this together and helping everything continue to run to where we can have this program today. So we just want to tell all those guys thank you. Our Ag Committee and then the board there also were the ones that helped plan and help program or help develop the programming for this. So again, thank you to all you guys that are on that committee. We certainly appreciate all the help that you give to us for going through this. Obviously, it's a little different. We used to run nearly all day. We're going to run until about lunch today. Then you get your sack lunch and you get to go home. That's, again, we're just trying to follow guidelines and make sure we're doing stuff appropriately to practice the correct COVID things that we're supposed to do to make us safe and make sure we're doing stuff right to follow what the governor wants us to do. So again, thank you for what you do for us. Without you guys and your input and your help and your volunteerism, none of this would be possible. So we just want to tell you thank you at the start for coming, one thing, and then for promoting and for supporting us. We are very, very grateful for what you do. All right, we're going to get started. We're going to run 2 programs and we'll have a little break. But first up, we're going to have Ken Jordan, who a lot of you know. Ken is the owner of Jordan Livestock Auctions. They have 2 of them, and one in San Saba and one in Mason. Ken's a great person. Ken is very, very knowledgeable about the cattle industry and the marketing side of it and the production side of it. And many of you don't know it. He doesn't like to brag, but I'm going to tell it because I'm proud of him. He was, we had just had our state meeting, and Ken was our Man of the Year representative for District 7. Because of all the volunteer work that he does, the support that he gives to our ag community through his sales, but also the educational events that he does. He's a great guy, and better yet, he's a great person because the way he lives his life, the family that he has. We're very, very grateful to have him in our community, and we're very grateful to have a chance to get to listen to him today. So Ken, if you're ready, let's roll. And by the way, told that we were going to have some live and some video presentations. Things fell through, and with changes daily happening, they're all going to be online today. But that's one of the things we're going to work through, and we certainly appreciate you here. So Ken, whenever you're ready, let's roll.
You bet, Jamie. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We're good
Jamie.
to go.
Okay,
Yep,
just
we're
want to
good.
make sure. Jamie, thank you. I appreciate your compliments there. I want to thank Judge Cunningham and Mayor Lang also, and you all at the Extension Service for putting this event on. I know it's been touch and go, and I know last week we were in Amarillo that you all asked me many times, are they going to shut it down? Are we going to stay open? So we got a lot of moving targets right now, and appreciate you all working with us, and that the community come together and get together and learn and maybe educate a little bit more on agriculture, where we are, what's happening, what's not happening, and so forth. So we appreciate that. Appreciate you all letting us use the facility over there in Llano and allowing different counties, surrounding areas to participate. So it's always been a good turnout, and I think it's one of the better programs that's put on in the state of Texas. So with that, I'm going to Jamie asked me to kind of bring you all up to date. We did have a call at one point, a Zoom call back in May. I don't know how many of you all were on that time, but we had about 140, 150 some odd folks, and kind of seeing where we were during this COVID deal. I'm going to kind of bring you up to date, kind of where we see it, what's all happened, and it's been a very, very fast whirlwind type tour. Seemed like every time we get a day or two where we're kind of settled down, we kind of see the direction it's going. Something drastic may happen and change the marketplace or whatever it may be. Just very, very unique times. But we kind of got into this about a year ago. In 2019, we were rolling along pretty good. And then about August of 2019, we had a major fire at the Tyson plant in Nebraska. And when that plant caught on fire, it was right at harvesting 30 to 35,000 head a week and 5,000 head a day, right at it. And so when you get that, all of a sudden, we're operating 95, 96% capacity to all the packing houses around, which that's about where we can operate, what I understand, because you got to have certain parts of the plant shut down at times for repairs, for cleaning, for maintenance, and all those sort of things. We had that fire in there, and it shut the operation down immediately. It was on that weekend. That following Monday, they had to redirect trucks all over the place to deliver those cattle that were coming to that plant. And not only did they have problems as far as live cattle getting to the other plants, is how are they going to handle all the customers that they sold the meat to out of that particular plant? And that becomes very cumbersome. and figuring out where that product going to get to. 5 loads go to this plant, 10 loads go to this plant, 15 go to that plant. How do you source that product for that particular company? And Nolan Ryan, a good friend of mine that sells cattle with us up here, I actually talked to him that week, and that was one of the plants they get a lot of their prime product out of. And he was just discussing of how difficult it was to source that product the first 2 or 3 weeks, exactly how they're going to get it, guarantee it to their retail shelf in order to put it on the shelf for the consumer. So that created a lot of problems. And during this whole time frame, you think about delivering cattle and moving truckloads of cattle. During that time frame, that was right at about 560,000 truckloads cattle moved to different plants during that time frame. That's a lot of cattle when you put in that kind of dynamics, and that's right at 4.5 months the plant was closed. So we got through that. It definitely hurt our prices. It definitely hurt overall attitude where our market was going into. But we finally, about latter part of November, 1st of December, the plant got offline. We got to operate 95, 98% capacity now again, and we brought those other cattle online. Things rolling along pretty good. January was a very good month. February was a very good month. And we didn't hear much about this new phenomenon that we're going to have to deal with. And then we roll along in about March, and here comes COVID-19. And right at the first, we didn't see a lot of problems on the meat packing side, but we did start having a lot of problems in how we were going to address this. How was the country going to address this? How were the states? How were the cities? And we had then the stay-at-home orders that got put into place. And we started talking about physical separation. We started about masks, and we had essential businesses were able to operate, but some of the operations were limited, what you could do, not do. In our own self, we were considered essential business since we do handle livestock. However, with uncertainty about what was all going on, we had to cancel our special female sales. That was one of our biggest ones of the year in April. And we finally did do it in a smaller way later on in May, about 2,000 head or whatever. And we put it completely virtual at that point in time. Had a very success at the time, but it was the first time I know myself that we've ever had a female sale where I wanted the parking lot full, overflowing, down the highway, whatever. We had about 8 or 9 pickups in the parking lot. Very concerning when you have a several $1 million worth of cattle that you've got to sell out there in 7 or 8 vehicles. But it was very successful, and we ended up getting through that real well. But it has kind of still changed some of the patterns where we go. But the unknowns is really what began to happen out here. What are the unknowns of the COVID-19? What is it going to do? How does it spread? Wear mask, no mask? We've had a lot of mixed messages over a period of times, and so we've had a lot of uncertainty in there. And one of the biggest things that COVID did, and where we started running some problems at the retail shelf, is that it changed meat production. And all of a sudden what happened is we had a rush on the grocery stores, because if you look at it prior to COVID, we're somewhere around 52 to 55% of our meals were eaten out at restaurants, 45 to 48% of the meals eaten at home. So all of a sudden you've got all your restaurants shut down, you got your bar restaurant combination shut down. You move everybody to eating at home. So you take all of a sudden runs on grocery store, you're adding about 42 to 43% of all meals. They're now having to go to the grocery store. So you've got 100% base of the people going to the grocery store to get their food. And that's a huge, huge increase. And a lot of folks were saying, well, why couldn't you take the meat that was going to restaurants, put it in the retail store? A lot of that product is made different, is packaged differently, especially. And so it doesn't fit well for the retail shelf. And so they're having problems of getting that conversion made over in a short period of time. And so what we ended up having is basically a rush on the grocery stores who were not set up to handle this large amount of different demand, which is almost not quite double, but close to it of what they had beforehand. And it wasn't just in meat products, it's other products too. And so when we got into that, that became a big problem. We were a very interesting story over here with our Lowe's during that time frame burning up and burning to the ground. We got to meet with Lowe's trying to get our new grocery store, temporary store put up. And in doing so, we learned a lot about what was happening in the retail store at that time. And they were telling us just their regional stores that they have. They got their base out of Levelland up there. They got warehouses out of Lubbock and different places. They were on a normal basis, pretty well every night, loading 155 to 160 some odd truckloads every night, distributing out to all the grocery stores. And that was very consistent. Some days a little more, some days a little less. Well, that short period of time, they started getting store orders where they needed 450 truckloads of product to get those grocery stores. They went out in the oil industry at that time, got some trucks out of there, and they'll get up to around 225, 250 loads out. The problem they got into, so every day they got behind about 200 loads. And just think about this, if you look at H-E-B, you look at Kroger, you look at Walmart, all those guys were having the same problems. And so what they had problems with is they couldn't get enough product. And then their warehouses, a lot of the manufacturing companies that manufacture product for them, they cannot get enough product manufactured to get at the warehouse. So let's just say they ordered 10 truckloads of beans that they needed at the warehouse to deliver among the different retail units of Lowe's. They may only get 2 truckloads of that. So they just kept getting further and further behind. And so they would just give that company 2 loads, somebody else 2 loads, somebody else 5 loads. And so all of a sudden, that's where we ran into that shortage and ran into is more distribution, manufacturing shortage. We changed the whole world around on how we operate. So that really told a lot about what was going in the industry, why we're seeing a shortage. We had plenty of beef at that time, and we had a lot of the other things, but they couldn't get it distributed out. And then some of the things were such demand that we needed more product, and we couldn't get our manufacturing up to scale that fast, that quick. So things rolled along that way, and we had to run on toilet paper and things of that sort. And then the packing industry was pretty good shape at the time. And then in May, we started having several plants, not only in the beef side, but also in the poultry side and the pork side. A large number of these employees became infected with COVID-19. Now, you got to understand these plants, they're folks that work there. They're very close together, especially on the fabrication lines. They'll have several thousand people on the fab lines. A lot of these plants will employ 30,000 to 3,600 people. Some maybe more than that. They're close together to work in the fabrication line. And so when they started coming down with COVID-19, some of these plants spread pretty rapidly. Also, a lot of the workers there, there are a lot of Vietnamese, a lot of Somalians, a lot of different from foreign countries that a lot of them will stay together as community. That's the way they live, where they came from. And so when they go home, a lot of their grandmas and grandpas and their uncles and aunts, they all live very close together. And so they spread that very rapidly. And so what happened there, that we had to begin to shut down several of the plants, not only in the beef side, but also in the pork side and the poultry side. And as we got through that, we started out where maybe we're 20,000 behind that week or that day in harvesting. Then we got to we're 120,000 head behind a week. Then we got up to 300,000 head. With that many plants shut down, that we got behind up to 300,000, maybe only harvesting half of what we normally do. Normal kills or normal harvest weeks will go 650 to 665,000 head. And that's what's kind of normal trend we have at the 95% capacity. But when you drop down to 300, 275, all of a sudden you're backing up a ton of cattle. And so as we moved on through May, we finally worked through these situations. The feds come in, the states come in. We did a lot of testing on a lot of the employees. They began to set up a lot of the shields and everything in the fabrication room, where they had shields between each person down the fabrication line, where they're cutting up different cuts of meat and whatever. They put more face masks, more shields, gave more room. When they did breaks, different locker space, a lot of those different things that they had to do in those plants. Well, the thing that occurred there, though, is in the fab lines especially, it began to slow down a little bit of our production level. So we don't have quite the production level we do today, quite the efficiency, because some of these things that they had to put in place slowed the production line down. That only didn't occur in beef, but also occurred in pork and also occurred in chickens in that time frame. And so all of a sudden during that time frame, we had a shortage of beef. It was a shortage, and people were running on the stores trying to get the product and all that. It wasn't really a short of beef. We had the product in the live animal. We just could not get it processed at the time. Is due to the COVID-19. So we had a processing problem during that time frame. And during that time frame of that, we saw our product jump from $2 and something on the pound on the box beef all the way up to some of the highest levels we've ever had. $4.76 on that front, almost doubled, a little bit more than doubled in about a 3 or 4 week period. And that was just lack of supply. People are scrambling to get product. Some of the few restaurants that opened up a little bit, they're needing some product too, but a lot of the retail shelf was. And then a lot of consumers were concerned that they were going to run out of beef like we did toilet paper. They didn't understand we still had a lot of product out there that just needed to be harvested. And so they would buy large quantities of product. Freezers is unbelievable when you go down to some of these places. If you want to order a freezer today, if they don't have one, it can be 3 or 4 months still today, even with our productions back up, because people were concerned that we may run out of meat and they needed to get a freezer to store a large quantity that they can hold over a period of time. That also pushed a lot of people trying to go to some of these smaller plants to get maybe some product from them or get cattle harvested. A lot of those guys were out up to 6 months, up to a year. Part of that reason is also the stock shows, Houston Stock Show and Rodeo, the Austin Rodeo and Stock Show. All those got basically canceled. All those steers and those stock shows had to go somewhere. So a lot of them end up going to some of these smaller plants. And so there's a lot of backlog there. And so just a lot of uneasiness, a lot of confusion, a lot of things were going on that the whole story wasn't being told on the media about the product and everything else. And so we finally got through that, and we started to get back operational to about 95% in the June timeframe. Not quite the 1st of June, but it was more back to normal, I guess you'd say. And so the last COVID problems in the plants and all those sort of things, so we got back operating in a very more, I'd say, normal fashion at that price. Now, what occurred during that time frame is we can harvest a lot of cattle. As far as the process of basically getting the animal in the first part of the packing house, we can move a lot of cattle through that. We put them in the coolers. The problem we have is capacity and speed in the fabrication side of it. So what we did for a while, the industry did, is because of the slowdown in fabrication and because some of the employees were still not there, we went to grinding a lot of our products. So just think of the carcass. You got your ends, your rounds, you got your chucks in the front. They took a lot of that product, instead of cutting up into roast and different products that we normally would have, maybe a little higher value product, just to get in more meat out and get more production, we started grinding a lot of that portion of the carcass. Kept our middle meats, basically our ribeyes, fillets, and those. But as far as the chucks and rounds, we ground a lot of that. We were able to do that much faster than having to go down the fab line and take out all the different cuts for your different arm roast or your rounds or sirloins, whatever that may be. And so that helped speed up our process, helped get more product on the line, and help get it out to our customers. So we're rolling it by July. We're in a lot better shape and everything. The only problem that we had now is we have backed up at this point in time anywhere from 950 to 1 million head of cattle that should have already been harvested. You miss 2 weeks and you're behind 300,000 cattle. Those 2 weeks, that's 600,000. And we did this almost for 4 weeks, not to that magnitude, but we did have a couple of weeks where we only harvested 300-something thousand. So we've got 1 million head of cattle out here. We're operating about 95% capacity right now. However, we may not be as fast as we were as far as harvesting, as far as fabrication, just because of the chain speed slowing down a little bit due to our new preventive measures we've had to place here because of COVID. And what happened there is we were going into this thing really good because the first 4 months of the year, we placed a little over 1 million less cattle on feed. So our prices were looking very good coming on. When you backed up that many cattle and put additional weight on them, and kind of give that in perspective, okay, during this last 25 days, 30 days, our cattle on average, and I watch this every week, were about at the time 54 pounds heavier than a year ago. So you just put this in numbers of 650,000, 55,000 head of cattle a week at 54 pounds more per carcass. And you divide that by truckloads, and I'm just figuring a truckload of meat right at 48,000 pounds. That's 730 something truckloads extra beef a week we've got to sell just by harvesting the same number of cattle we harvested last year because of the extra pounds we have on these cattle now. So that is a lot of cattle. You just think about if you were a meat purveyor or you're a meat salesman, you had to sell everything you sold last year, plus you have to sell 700 more loads each week. That's a big burden that you've got to put on yourself. And then also we were then beginning to see our prices come down a lot faster. And when you start doing that, that becomes uncertainty in there. Well, do I buy a lot of product now for a contract, or do I buy kind of what they call hand to mouth? Every day I'll buy a little here, sell, buy a little sell, so I don't get caught on the downturn, just like you don't get caught on the upturn going up too high. We've moved that weight now. I saw this morning we're about 34 pounds over. And so we have made some impact on this, I think. We're definitely trying to get all these carcasses and bigger cattle moved out. Some of these feed yards did not have a, say, relationship with some of these packers real well. They just took the highest bid, sold wherever they could, and didn't have a what I call a continued relationship every week. They sell cattle to them. Some of those guys had difficulties. I've got some customers that had up to even 60 days that they had the cattle extra on feed before they finally got them harvested. So you can imagine those cattle getting big, those cattle getting inefficient on their cost of gain. And then also we got into those big yield grade 4s and 5s. You get discounts on those. And so some of those guys took some pretty big losses during this time frame. And with that 34 pounds extra right now, doing the same mathematics we did, if everything is equal, we've got about 460 extra truckloads a week to sell now. So definitely is decreasing. We are going into July now, and we're in July and into August. Those are the hotter days of the year. Our marketing as a whole will slow down some. Consumer demand slows down when it gets extremely hot like this. So we'll see where our movement is. The next big time frame will be Memorial Weekend. We'll be looking for that and looking for the opportunity to put beef as one of the things that they'll feature at this point in time. The biggest thing is also that we not only have this happening, pork had the same problems. Poultry somewhat did too. Pork is probably in a lot bigger trouble than we are as far as industry-wise of backlog. They have their segment so synchronized that they got, when the hogs leave out of a house and goes to harvest, they have the next hogs in there just within a few hours or days or whatever it may be. So at the end of here recently, the 1st of July, I think they said 1.1 million hogs right now backed up. By the end of August, their thing is going to be 1.6 million. And by the end of the year, because of what they've got on feed, they could be behind 2.5 million head of hogs by the end of the year. And what they have had their problem in is that operation is so efficient that they have now, because of these things they've had to do to their plant to make it safer for the employees and everything, instead of operating at 100% capacity, they're operating at only 95% capacity. That 5% drop in their operating efficiency is going to lead them to huge backlog of porks at this point in time. So we'll see what will happen with them. They're trying to even ways, I understand, shipping a lot of pork overseas, maybe just in a carcass farm. They're smaller carcasses. They can do that where they don't have to go to the fab line and that sort of process and move product out faster. There have been some euthanizing of some of the hogs in some of the industry so that they don't have an overrun of too many hogs on down the road. That also has a lot of less eggs have been put on for the poultry side also. We don't have that in the beef side at this point in time. We do have some management going on, I think, in some of the weights of these carcasses. Hopefully we can move on that. The biggest positive thing we do have is that we did have 1 million less cattle placed on feed January through May. So through April, I mean. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll get through this and this thing will be in a much better shape and maybe get somewhat a more normalized movement of our product. There is some things that did happen in here that probably really helped our price. As you know, there's been numerous states that have filed, asked the Secretary of Agriculture and the Department of Justice to file antitrust suits. The President of the United States did here about a month and a half ago. He actually on Wednesday night asked the Department of Justice to investigate the 4 major packers, which they control about 85% of all the packing houses in the United States. They asked for that to be investigated. And it's at that point in time, in that week, I guess you say, or really from that Wednesday evening, we're sitting at some cattle bringing 95 in the fats, depending on what packer, some bringing $1. We saw that go up on Thursday to $1.05, some to $1.10. By the following week, we're up to $1.15. And then even the following week, we had some willing to pay $1.20. And then we had one packer even willing to give a bonus of 5 cents over $1.20 and got to $1.25. So that probably helped us a lot during that time frame because we had an abundance of cattle needed to be harvested. They could have easily offered 85 cents, 75 cents for those fat cattle. But I think with this whole investigation, the Department of Justice that was initiated on them being put in place, I think they decided that take the high road and they offered more for the cattle probably than they had to at that time frame. And so we'll see where this goes to. I think it'll take a while, this investigation will. We did have recently, which I was not aware they're investigating in, part of the poultry industry. They've just indicted several poultry companies back about a month ago for price fixing. And so we'll see where that goes as far as once it reaches the legal realm of a court basis, whatever, in the next couple of years, a year or so. We'll see what the investigation does in the beef side also. There's a number of other things that are going on there, some discussions about cash trade. We've been working a lot with the Cattle Raisers Association and some of the cash trade and discussions of do we need to mandate a certain amount. Been learned a lot about that, maybe not mandate a general where everything goes into cash, but there's about 4 regions that trade a lot of cattle. Maybe looking at some of those, and we need a certain amount of that trading in cash at some point in time, maybe some redoing of our confidentiality in some of our futures trading. We got some of our trading limits there in the process of being changed. So a number of things going in place. There's a lot of action probably going into area right now. There may be some things even put in the stimulus bill that they're beginning to work on this week to address some of these things possibly. Very, very fluid right now. So we'll see with that what's going on. And then we'll find out probably the ramifications of all this here within this next year or year and a half. It depends on how fast the investigation goes. So a lot of interesting things that are happening there. You go into now where we at. You got COVID-19 and overall the market, I think, after July the 4th, which I was very, very pleased with. A lot of my customers I talked to, just really a lot of unknowns. After July the 4th, it gets hot, things slow down a little bit. Then we started the spike in COVID cases. Who's going to shut down? Who's not? We're just now getting the restaurants up and running. They're starting to buy product. Demand looks good. Economy's going to be picking up and everything else. And then we get this spike. So then we get concerned. Where are we going from here now? But anyway, overall, I think the market is looking at fairly optimistic. I think they're looking at even the mask requirements that are in place now. Some are seeing, I saw last night on the news, saying that those have seen some improvements in our cases overall in the United States, even some communities in Texas. And so a lot of the fund guys, the equity markets that invest in a lot of our cattle futures, invest in the stock market and everything else, they're looking that we're going to get better and our economy is going to get stronger. And we're going to get out of this lockdowns that we've been in and maybe not go back to a complete lockdown like we were. So they're optimistic. They have really, since July the 4th, excuse me, invested a lot of their money in the funds. So we've seen the feeder board and the live cattle board jump about $10 a hundred, some even more than that in the last 2 weeks. That has brought our live cash up too. So here at the market on a real basis for stockers and feeders, we've seen a definitely $10 to $15 increase on that because of what the futures market has done and the confidence that it has in there. So that definitely has helped out. I think the vaccine, I saw a big deal on it last night. It looks more promising as this come along. Any positive news like that, I think helps the overall attitude of the marketplace. It helps our attitude and makes it we're going to get this large quantity of beef moved through the system. Now, one thing that you may look at, you remember a while ago, back in the part of May, we saw boxed beef go to $4.76 a pound. Unbelievable, largest record on history. As of this morning or yesterday, I guess it was, choice boxed beef was at $2.01. We're almost at $1.99. That's a huge, huge drop, almost $2.79 on that at boxed beef. Select was at $1.91 yesterday. So you look at that, retailers have had a real challenging problem. So have the folks that have been in the restaurant business. When you see that product go up from $2 all the way up to $4.76, just think about what you're a retailer and you're buying the product for HEB, or you're buying it for Lowe's, or you're buying it for Kroger. You're in charge of that meat counter. How do you buy for that? Number one, you don't know 100% what the demand's going to be like, but at the time, demand was huge because everybody moved from restaurant trade, they moved to the grocery store trade. How much do you buy, though? If it's going up $10 to $15, $20 every few days, which is what it was doing, you buy 100 truckloads, 5 truckloads. What if it goes back down then? They did not know all this. So they'd buy kind of to hand them out, get enough product in there, and it kept rising, and then the beef got extremely high. And we probably lost some consumers. They probably went to alternative product. Pork also did jump because they just didn't have production levels there either. And then we had some of these plant-operated base companies that came in here marketing all their plant-based products because they were cheaper and all this sort of thing. But we have now moved back to a lower level on the boxed beef. I do have a lot of people always wondering, where's retail at? How come they have not come down as far? They have not yet, because they still got some of that product that they bought probably for a future delivery at a higher price. As they get that gone, it will continue to come down over a period of time as long as demand does increase too. Because the beef is basically, a lot of times the retailer will say, a loss leader. They put in the back part of the store because they know people come for product. Beef is one of the biggest things that come to a retail store for a grocery store. And as they go back to the meat counter, they'll buy all their other product, which has a lot higher markup than basically what our beef products and pork products and poultry do there. So they want to sell that product. They want to be able to get that consumer in there. So hopefully we'll continue to increase our demand, even though these hot days and as we move forward, Memorial Day. Feature of beef is interesting. We saw a retail article here recently that we're about a third under last year of featuring beef. So that means we're only featured beef about 75% of what we did last year at the retail level. Now, most of that is because of all the uncertainties. How do you feature a product and want to put a special on sirloins or ribeyes, whatever it may be, if you don't know if you're going to get the product or not, and what price is that product going to be when you do receive it? So all those uncertainties basically have inhibited us on doing any kind of specials and featuring like we normally do. So that definitely has had a impact on some of our sales of beef, but just still, thank goodness, we're still moving it at a very, very good level. And one thing I have seen on these plant-based products, if you saw most of the product that's left in the retail shelf when we almost ran out of the product, when a lot of the packing houses shut the doors, was your plant-based products. That was the least acquired product that they wanted. Now, they did sell quite a bit of it because that was the only thing left. Another thing that just happened, like Beyond Beef and some of those guys like that, they had a recent test with McDonald's up in Canada. I just saw recently that McDonald's has abandoned that. That was just a trial test for all their McDonald's up in Canada, and they were not having the demand for that plant-based beef, for that Beyond Beef or whatever it may be product in their retail stores. So therefore, they have canceled that trial now. So that's very, very good for us. That means our consumers like our product. They want our product. It tastes good. And I think it will definitely be here for a while. We do have to be very conscious of what's going on in there because they're trying to act as though they are beef. There's several legislative initiatives that are in place right now to basically have it described as a different product, not beef, because the ingredients in it does not equal to what we have in our beef product. So that we'll watch that as that moves along. However, a lot of our meat companies, the large meat companies, have invested in these plant-based products. They have put a lot of millions of dollars in there because what they want to do is sell a product in a store. And if this sells better than beef, they may go that route. So we got to watch that in the direction they take that. But I think they're having a very difficult time in making that product taste as good as what our product does and the good job that we've done. Our industry has done a tremendous job here in the last 20 years from where we were when I did our beef audits back in the 80s and 90s. We had a lot of different issues we're dealing with, from tenderness to quality to size of ribeyes, all those different things, injection sites, all those. We have improved that dramatically. We're having record numbers of cattle that are grade choice right now. Part of that is some of the cattle are a lot bigger, fed longer. But even prior to this, we were really, really meeting the consumer demand in a lot better way than what we have in its past. Also, our exports are still going to be very, very important. We did drop off on our exports with the price and the quantity of product that we have, and so did pork and all those. Hopefully, those are continuing to rebound the way we look now. And that'll all depend upon the economies of these other countries. China is one country that we have initiated a new trade agreement. We'll see how that goes. There's a lot of issues there. We'll see if they stay committed to what they agreed to. They've got a major issue still. I visited with several folks the last time about swine flu. They had a tremendous amount and still going on of their swine have been eliminated in that country. They eat a lot of pork over there, and they're not able to even come close nowhere to produce the amount of pork they need. So they're going to have to buy a lot through other countries and also beef to other country to meet the demand. So we'll see where that goes to as a whole. One of the biggest things that I think out of this that we have really come through well is that beef is safe. Our product is safe. There were some concerns in some of the TV interviews and everything. Can COVID pass through meat to the consumer? And I think everybody did a great job. Our beef council, all those involved, the research involved, all those folks did a great job in basically refuting that and saying, no, beef is safe. It cannot pass there, and it's safe to consumer. So I'm very pleased with that. At least we come away from that you can still eat a healthy meal and get a good product from us. So I'm pleased with that. We got a lot of unknown ways to go, I guess, here. I'm still surprised where we're sitting at the market right now. It's better than what I would have anticipated. And I think that's just based on the expectations that some folks, especially the equity markets, are seeing out in front of us of where we're going. And every day as y'all watch the news, if you watch the news anymore, most of it's pretty negative, and you're not sure sometimes what to believe, not to believe, a lot of mixed messages, but the markets watch that. And so right now it looks to be moving as a positive way on some of these features and everything. So I hope we continue that, and hopefully we can stay profitable as we move forward. I think one of the biggest things in this area we're facing right now is the dry conditions. Had a large fire over here in McKillop County, burned a lot of acreage over there. Appreciate all the fire departments. Had several fires up here in Mills County, also in Sensaba County. And I know others that have been very large, and we just got to be careful of that because we are in dry times right now. And we do have a lot of fuel from the rains we had early in the spring. And so we just got to be careful of that so we can maintain our pastures. Looks like we got some good rain coming maybe this weekend, I hope. And it'll put us into some better conditions at this point in time. But overall, I think the cow numbers, we're going to see a report here for long, will probably be dropping some. We have been moving a lot of heifers the last year and a half or 2 years. If you look at the feed yard level, a lot more heifers being harvested in the past. Now you look at it right now, they're not. That's because we're behind on our harvesting side. But a lot less heifers have been kept for replacement females. We've been aggressively harvesting our cows and our bulls. So at some point, we'll see a lower cow number. It could be midterm, it could be at the end of the year, and therefore would raise additional profitability in our operation. So we rebuilt this herd in a very fast time after our 2011 drought. We built it back after it started raining in almost 3 years, which is just unbelievable compared to previous years. That shows our genetics that we have. Also, I think it shows the country got a lot of rain very quickly in some areas, and they started adding a lot of heifers to the operation. So we'll see where we are now. The biggest thing is I hope down the road we can see additional capacity, whatever it may be, in our packing area. I've talked a lot about in some of our circles of the cattle industry is that if we can harvest a lot more cattle, one of the big things we may want to look at is improving our fabrication lines, increasing the size of them so we can fabricate more product and get it out to the consumer faster. If we can harvest them, then let's fabricate a lot more. We'll see what that does. We are seeing a lot of probably little smaller packers that will come in that will assist in that. Not huge amounts. They got some bills in place right now that basically state to state, you'll be able to sell product and everything. But to them to scale up to 650, 675,000 a week is not totally doable. But we're seeing definitely some folks move in that direction, and they'll go direct to consumer on that if you have the ability to do that and the time and effort on that part. One of the things mentioned, we hear a lot, and I read an article the other day, and something to keep in mind that we work a lot, seem like, to raise our biggest calves, the most genetics that we can get out of them, and how many pounds per cow we produce. One of the other things that I want to keep reminding folks that, and I read this the other day and I hadn't really thought about it a lot, but there's been several studies done, I think 1977, and several others come out, that the economic value of reproduction, and that is, say, if you have 100 cows and how many do you get bred back? Is it 95? Is it 97? Is it 90? Is it 85? Nutrition, mineral, all has a lot to do with that. A lot of times we get in a drought, first thing I've heard some customers say, one thing they can't really see is affect them is their minerals. So they cut the mineral because they need to cut their costs, and which I understand cutting costs is very important. But this is very interesting, though. You may kind of keep it back in your mind as you select your bulls, select everything. Also watch your value of reproduction. They said it's 5 times greater than the calf's growth. So what they're saying is basically one calf could equal $600, $700, $800 if you get that extra calf, 2 calves extra if you do a lot better job on reproduction, making sure more cows calve each year than what maybe we're doing today. That can be nutrition, that can be just overall management, medication, and minerals or anything of that sort that you want to add to it. take a look at that also. Over-round entire program, I guess you could say, would be very, very beneficial. So those are some of the things I just want to put back. I hear a lot about genetics, and I believe in that very strongly, but also remember about your overall reproductive and how many calves you're having out of your cows, and what can you do to potentially improve that. So I think that's very important. If you look at that, I do have one quote a guy sent to me, and I'll read it right quick. It's kind of interesting. This industry is not for the faint of heart. I wake up every morning and I look at markets. I look at the stock market. I look at the financial markets. I go look at the futures market, what we're trading in early hours on our cattle live. I look at the hog market and oil market, because that has a lot of bearing on the whole thing. And I mean, every morning's been volatile. And some mornings you're glad to have that break when the markets aren't trading. But this is an interesting industry, but I think there's one reason why we do have this. This was in the last episode of Yellowstone, and this is before the new series came out just recently. I think series number 3, if any of you are watching it. But if you haven't, it still is a good deal to say. John Dutton, who's a major actor in there, and while spending some time in the mountains with his grandson, who is Tate, said, "Ranching is a terrible business, grandson." This is what Dutton said. "We can't control the price of beef or hay or the diesel it takes to take the cattle to the auction, or the hay we put out for the cattle. There's federal regulations, there's state regulations, there's county regulations, and there's people in the city that'll sue us, complain over the way we raise the food they eat. There's blizzards and droughts. Then half the herd tries to get into a river and don't get out, while the other half is looking for a hole in the fence just so they can go stand in the middle of the highway, maybe get hit by a car, or they go to wander into the forest and get eaten by a wolf or a grizzly bear." Then the grandson said, with his wise old 8-year-old wisdom, "Looks like Grandpa," and asked this, "Well, if ranching is so hard, how come do we do it?" And John Dutton said, without skipping a beat, says, "Because it's one hell of a life, Tate. It's one hell of a life." So I think one thing we stay with this is we love this industry. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a great lifestyle, and it's a great enjoyment to be a part of this industry. I think the folks that are in it are really down to earth, good folks. And we got a number of folks that are beginning to move back. I've got a friend of mine that I did not realize till just yesterday. They're moving back to Mason out of Dallas. They handle insurance up there, and they're just tired of what's going on, tired of what could happen with the schools and everything else. They bought a house in Mason, Texas, out in the country, and they're moving back. So we'll have this lifestyle. I think we got to protect it, make sure it continues on for our children and our grandchildren and those that are future. We change along with some of it with new ideas, new technology, but we keep the basic roots of what we believe in and where our true heart is. So I just want to thank everyone. Appreciate all your support you've had in the past. Jamie, it's been great working with the Extension Service and all what y'all do. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to continue at this point in time. I guess if they can, we could ask questions. We got about 8 minutes, I think, left on the program.
All right, thanks, Ken. Can I get an amen on that last part? Very good. Does anybody have any questions for Ken while we got him on here? Maybe something online too, so I think Marty and Robert's going to check that.
You bet. Hey, Jamie, while you're finding if they're finding a question, I did have somebody back in April wanted to know what they thought the cattle price would be in January. And I had to tell them I'm not sure yet. That's a little too far out.
You want to ask it, or you want to?
Yes. Is it true that just commercial buyers are encouraged at the auctions today rather than the small buyers? Or do you let the small buyers in also?
All buyers are available. We've not eliminated any buyers at the sale.
There was a time whenever nobody could get in but the buyers.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what she was getting at. But
yeah,
it's
so
all the time.
right at the beginning with the unknown and the number of folks are out allowed together. Just because unknown, only thing we allowed in at that time were buyers. We didn't eliminate a small buyer, big buyer, or anything, but all buyers were allowed to come in. There's no problem with that. We are allowing all sellers and buyers now. We call them essential sellers, essential buyers. we have opened up the ring and that we ask everybody to be cautious. We got hand sanitizer and those sort of things around here, but all buyers have been allowed in. We're qualified as an essential business, so we're able to let the folks in here and do their normal business. So yes, ma'am, all buyers have been allowed in.
I've got a question about your prices on the boxed beef. How high did it get, and then what it's back down to now?
It got all the way up to I think it's $476, and we're down to $201.74 yesterday. That's how high it got. Now
that's where we're at. So that's a pretty big change.
Yes, and that has really happened since about the middle of May, latter part of May to today. So you're talking about 50 days, 60 days, we've seen that. And that was when we were at the lowest point, the lowest amount of cattle being harvested. I think that's kind of got into a week of where we only, like 2 weeks in a row, we only harvested about 300 and something thousand head of cattle instead of the 655,000.
Gotcha. Another question, like our costs, interest rates and stuff are going down. You think that's gonna encourage more cow-calf operations to buy, increase their herds, or new people buying into the cow-calf operation, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think as a whole where we're at probably, like say, I think the tendency has been we're leveled out on overall cow-calf level. I don't see a lot of expansion going on right now. I do see people have an opportunity though that we got older cows and it's an opportunity to sell them and then turn around and replace them with some younger cows. And to do that, if they're able to borrow, the interest rates are very, very, very reasonable right now to be able to do that. If you want to, and the packer cow market is strong. So if you got some old cows, it's time to sell them and you can replace them with some younger cows. And if you need to finance in it, my gosh, with the interest rates as low as they are, we haven't seen this opportunity very often. What they're saying, these interest rates could stay with us for several years right now, these lower levels at this point in time.
Marty, is there any online questions? Not any online. So is everybody good? Let's give Ken a round of applause and tell him thank you. And tremendous job. And Ken does a tremendous job for a lot of us here in Llano County. We're very, very fortunate to have the amount of auctions that we do around here, we do have a lot of livestock around here, but we're also blessed. You don't really know it till you move somewhere else. Opportunity that you have here and around here for somebody that does such a good job for marketing your cattle, and then also having a place to go to buy good quality cattle. We're very, very blessed, and we just want to tell you thank you, and thank you for coming today online and visiting with us.
You bet, Jamie. This is my first, I guess. You never get too old to do new technology. So I want to thank everybody for being here, and I can't see your faces and everything, but anything we can do for you, give us a call. Anybody need females? We do have a sale Saturday, about 2,000 head, Jamie, so we'll try to help you out there. And any question y'all have, give us a shout. We'll be more than happy to visit you.
And they got that low interest rate, so go buy you some more. Here we go.
That's right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. All right, that was very, very knowledgeable, and Ken does a super job of just communicating to us his side of the marketing part of it. He's always, like I said before, we're blessed. Honestly, we are to have the kind of options that we have around us, and the kind of people that we get to work with in terms of making, getting the best we can out of what we have in terms of the production of our cow-calf operations. Tremendous job. All right, we're going to get started with our next program. Dr. Bob Lyons, who has done a tremendous job over the years. He's our range specialist for this area. Kind of saddens me to tell you this, but he's getting ready to retire. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to find somebody to take his place, but they will in the extension service because he does such an important job for us in terms of helping with the range management and working with new chemicals and adjusting those and making them work. And Bob does an excellent job. We're going to miss him, but I think he's still, I bet if we ask real nice, he might come back and still help us some more. So anyway, Dr. Bob, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, man, just speak up. That's not real loud.
Okay, can you hear me?
No, sir.
Oh, wow.
Try it again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, very good. Glad to hear you. I guess I can't see you, but glad to hear you.
Okay. I've got one correction on the retirement aspect. I decided to postpone it for a little while.
Wow, that's tremendous. Thank you, thank you.
With the COVID situation and all the repercussions of that, and the fact is that if I retired, I can't go anywhere anyhow. So I figured I might as well work. So,
Good point. Be bored at home.
yeah.
I guess whenever you get ready,
All right. Okay, so I'm ready to go here. We're going to look at a little bit about herbicide update.
Hey, Bob, we can't see your screen.
You can't?
No, sir.
Okay, wait a minute.
Somewhere down.
No, he
Oh, here it comes.
There it is. Okay, you got it now?
We got it. We're ready to roll now. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we're going to look at a little bit about herbicide update. Then we'll get into some information about using spike. And so first thing I wanted to go kind of talk to y'all about was understanding some things on the label. And most of the herbicides that we deal with are acid-based. And so on the label, you're going to see active ingredient and you're going to see acid equivalent. And so it's kind of important to understand what the difference is between these two for the acid herbicides. So the active ingredient is the herbicide formulation. And so we can have esters, we can have salts, we can have amine salts. So that's the way the herbicide is formulated. And the reason for those formulations, for example, esters are very active, but they're also very volatile. So the salts are a little less maybe active, but they're way less volatile. In other words, they don't turn to vapors as easily as an ester does. So the reasons for having those active ingredients or herbicide formulations. But then on the label, you're going to see acid equivalent, and that's the parent acid yield. That tells you how much of the parent acid you're going to get in that container, and it's listed as pounds per gallon. And the reason that's important is that's the active portion of the formulation. And so what happens is those alcohols and salts are separated from the acid when they get into the plant. And then you wind up with the acid that binds to the target site within the plant. And the real, I guess, take-home message to you is that if you're going to compare two different herbicide products, you want to look at acid equivalents. And I'm going to show you why here with slides. Okay, so this is 2,4-D-amine. Active ingredient is, whoops, went the wrong way there. The active ingredient is an amine salt, and then down at the bottom it says equivalent, and that shows the acid equivalent. So in this 2,4-D-amine 4, we've got 3.8 pounds of acid per gallon. So if I wanted to know if there was another 2,4-D product equivalent to this, I would need to look at that acid equivalent. And typically this is 3.8, we typically just round it up and say it's 4 pounds per gallon. All right, so Surmount, a little bit different label. We've got two active ingredients here. We've got picloram amine salt, and we got fluoroxypyr ester. And what's different about this label, and you got to be a little bit careful with this one, and make sure that you're looking for the acid equivalent. So down at the bottom, it lists the pounds of the active ingredients, the salt and the ester. But that's really not what you want to know. What you want to know is this other portion, that 0.67 pounds of AE, which is acid equivalent per gallon. So if I were going to compare, if there was a generic product of Surmount, for example, and I wanted to know if it was equivalent to the Surmount, I'd want to look at that acid equivalent portion of the label to compare those products. Okay, this is a product that if you've got a Helena dealer close by, you could see, because it's a Helena product. It's an acid active ingredient to begin with. They don't attach anything to it. They don't make it an ester or salt. And so down at the bottom, you've got the equivalent dicamba acid, 2,4-D acid. And the reason this is still important is, for example, we've got two products here. We've got Latigo and Weedmaster, and they both have dicamba plus 2,4-D. So the question is, are these products the same in terms of acid equivalence? Or what do they deliver in terms of parent acid? So if we look at the acid equivalent, we're going to see that Latigo has more dicamba, has 1.8 pounds of dicamba versus 1 for Weedmaster. There's a little bit of difference in the 2,4-D, but the big difference is on the dicamba end. So that's where that acid equivalent information can really come in handy, so you'll know if you're dealing with exactly the same products in the end. Okay, here's two Corteva products, Grazon Next HL and Pasturol HL. You may not see Pasturol HL, but I had a question about this about a year or so ago about what it was. And so it's both these products have aminopyrrolid plus 2,4-D. So again, the question is, are they the same? And if you look at acid equivalent, you'll see a big difference in the amount of aminopyrrolid. 0.41 pounds of aminopyrrolid in Grazon Next versus 0.1 in the Pasturol. Pasturol has a little bit more 2,4-D. So just because they have the same active ingredients or in them doesn't mean that they're going to have the same acid equivalence. And that's where you really need to look on the label if you're comparing different products. Okay, but the active ingredient information is also important. It's useful. And where it's really useful is so you know what kind of herbicide carrier to use. So for example, if you look on the label and it says the product is an ester, you'll know that you can mix it with oil or you can mix it with water. So for example, Remedy Ultra, those are ester formulas, but we can mix those with water or we can mix them with diesel. If you mix them with water, what happens is they turn cloudy, and the reason they turn cloudy is because there are emulsifiers in the product that disperse the product through the water. On the other hand, if you're looking at amines or salts like Sendero, Tordon, those only mix with water. We cannot mix those with oil. And I'm going to show you that in the next slide here. This is a Remedy on the left at 25% concentration. Sendero on the right at 25% concentration. And you can see that the Sendero did not mix. It settled to the bottom. And even if I shake up that Sendero bottle and set it down within just a few seconds, it starts to precipitate out. So, and the reason I tell you this is that when Sendero first came out, there were people who were trying to mix Sendero in oil. Maybe because some of the marketing information said you had everything you needed in one container, so forth. So there's a little bit of misunderstanding about how to use that particular product. So the active ingredients can tell you what kind of carrier you can use. The acid equivalent can tell you if the products are the same. Okay, so not all herbicides are acid-based. So Spike 20P, for example, is not an acid-based herbicide. and so we don't have to worry about the acid equivalent. What we need to look at is the active ingredient. And so in this case, we're looking at 0.2 pounds of active ingredient per pound of product. So if we were looking at another product, that's tebuthiron product, that's what we want to look at. And Valparl is the same way, not an acid-based herbicide. So here we want to look at active ingredients, and this particular product has 2 pounds of active ingredient per gallon. Okay, so one of the things that I get asked kind of frequently is how soon do I need to, once I mix my herbicide, how soon do I need to apply it? Or if I get caught with half a tank, if I get rained out, you know, out in the field and spraying and I get rained out and I can't spray the rest of the tank, how long is it going to last? And it's hard to say how long it's going to last, but one thing that we know, for example, with triclopyr is that it's rapidly degraded by sunlight. So what I would suggest is, since I can't tell you exactly how long it would last in the tank, if you get caught like that, take that tank and park it in the shade and try to, if you can, cover it with a tarp to prevent sunlight from getting, and I don't care what herbicide that is, just try to get it where sunlight doesn't get to it. But the other thing you might want to do is watch the weather a little closer and try to make sure that you're not going to get caught in the rain. All right, so this is Invora, and I'm going to talk more in depth about Invora here in a few minutes, but relative to application after mixing, this is the only product that really is labeled for range that says this, the only herbicide that says this. At the bottom there, number 8, it says spray the solution within 24 hours of mixing to avoid product degradation. So I've looked on other labels, haven't found that kind of information on other herbicides that we use in range. But for this particular herbicide, you want to pay particular attention to it because it's on the label, and they're kind of giving you some warning that you don't want that product sitting around in the tank for very long. And then this is dynamic. This is a product that we use particularly with aerial applications and broadcast herbicide applications. It's a modified vegetable oil surfactant blend. And down there at number 6, it says should be applied within 36 hours after mixing. So I'm just showing you these 2 examples to make sure that if you're dealing with a new herbicide you haven't dealt with before, you might want to check the label and make sure there's nothing like that on the label. But try to avoid getting caught with half a tank that you're not sure is going to last very long. Okay, this is a publication. It's ESC 046, and what's nice about it, it's a front and back publication. It lists active ingredient of herbicides, trade names, grazing restrictions, hay harvest restrictions, rain fast intervals, and it also tells you if you need a pesticide applicator license for that particular product. So it's kind of a handy guide in that respect. It's undergoing revision right now because there are 3 new herbicides that I'm going to talk about in a minute here that are added to this particular publication. So you can get it either, you can get your county agent to maybe download it from the bookstore, or you can go to the AgriLife bookstore and download it. It's a PDF file, it's free. And you can put it on your computer or print it out or whatever you want to do with it. So it's a pretty handy guide, especially for whether or not you need a license to buy that particular product. Okay, all right, so let's get into some new herbicides. This herbicide, Mesaview, it's not totally new. It hit the market last year in 2019. And primarily what it's known for is prickly pear control, faster visual activity on pear, faster kill than picloram or Tordon 22K. Oak recovery, similar to Tordon. One of the things that we see with aerial applications on prickly pear where oak is involved, we try to make those applications in the wintertime before those oaks have that new flush of growth. And Tordon is going to cause some defoliation. Surmount is going to cause more severe defoliation. And what we've seen with Mesoview is the defoliation and recovery that we get is equivalent to what we see with Tordon. So if the herbicide gets on at the right time, before those new leaves come on, probably within about 4 to 8 months, you're going to see some significant recovery with Tordon or Mesoview. Whereas if you sprayed with Surmount, it's going to hurt you quite a bit longer, and you may not get recovery on some of the plants totally. We're also looking at the potential for this product of control on broom snakeweed, cat claw mimosa, poison ivy, Queen's Delight, old man's beard. We don't really have enough data yet to come up to have a recommendation or a suggestion in our publication 1466, but those are some species that we're working on. Okay, this is some time-lapse photography with prickly pear. It was applied in January. At the top, it's Mesoview, and then at the bottom with Tordon, and you can see by July, the Mesoview prickly pear was laying down on the ground. The Tordon prickly pear was still standing. So quicker visual activity and quicker kill than Tordon with the Mesoview. Okay, so we looked at some different rates of Mesoview for individual plant treatments, and the main thing you need to understand about this graph is the higher the box and the smaller the box, the better. If the box is really small, that tells you there's not very much variation around the average. And so we looked at Mesoview from 0.25% all the way up to 1% and compared it with Pasture Guard, Surmount, and Tordon at 1%. And you can see that 1% Mesoview has the smallest box and the highest box. And what that means is that at 12 months, we're seeing more consistent kill of the prickly pear with Mesoview than these other products at 12 months. Okay, this is a 12-month ground broadcast, and this is 4 counties, and Llano is included in these 4 counties. And so we had Mesoview at 8 ounces up to 32 ounces. And you can see the 32 ounce, again, that's the smallest box, the highest box. So it's the most consistent compared to lower rates or compared to Surmount and Tordon. And then even with aerial applications, what we saw at 12 months was more consistency with the Mesoview at 32 ounces than the lower rate or with Tordon. You can see a real difference with the Tordon. That box is really big. That tells you there's a lot of variation around that average at 12 months. Okay, at 24 months, not a whole lot of difference between Mesoview and Tordon. There's still a 10 percentage point numerical difference, but statistically we can't separate those two numbers. So the advantage is you get there quicker with the Mesoview typically, but Tordon catches up at about 2 years. Okay, some details. 3 active ingredients: aminopyrrolid, which is one of the ingredients in Sendero, picloram, and fluroxypyr. So basically it's aminopyrrolid plus Surmount. It's a restricted use herbicide. It costs around $100 to $105 a gallon. So looking about $25 per acre herbicide cost. Comes in 30-gallon drums and 1 gallon containers. And if we look at cost, Surmount is an IPT, it runs around $58 a gallon. Tordon Broadcast is going to run us around $17.50 a gallon. So the question you have to answer is, do you want to pay that difference for that quicker kill? And that, so what Mesaview is giving us is more consistent kill and quicker kill at 12 months. Okay, so where can you use it? You can use it on rangeland and permanent grass pastures. And you can use, the hay is limited to farm and ranch use where it's applied for 18 months unless there's a supplemental label. And there is a supplemental label. And so what that supplemental label does is it allows that hay to be sold off the place, but then the stewardship of the hay becomes the buyer's responsibility. And the seller has to let the buyer know that it was treated with a product that has aminopyrrolid in it. There's a 3-day grazing clean out if you're moving to sensitive broadleaves for an 18-month period. The hay and manure cannot be used in compost. And this little diagram to the left there, any product that Dow has, or Corteva now has, that has aminopyrrolid in, and it's going to have that little diagram that basically says you can't use the hay or the manure for compost. Okay. All right. So Duracor, this is new this year. It's a weed herbicide, broadleaf spectrum weed control, highly favorable environmental profile, low use rates, 12 to 20 ounces to the acre. Low odor, you can mix it with fertilizer, and we believe it has extended control on about 140 plus weeds with grass safety. Okay, so it's 2 products, Rinsecore, which is a new active ingredient, and aminopyrrolid. Non-restricted use, don't have to have a license. Green Chemistry Award, runs around $95 a gallon. So at that 12 to 20 ounces per acre, that's a cost of about $742 to $1484 per acre. And compared to Grazon Next, at the Grazon Next at $48 a gallon and 24 ounces to the acre, you're looking at $9 an acre herbicide cost. And then Grazon P plus D at a quart to the acre, you're looking at $7.50 an acre. So at the low rate, Duracor is competitive with these other 2 herbicides that we see, Next and P plus D. It's going to cost more if you have to go to the higher rate. And same locations that we can use Mesaview at, we can use the Duracor. You've still got that limitation on hay. There is a supplemental label for Duracor, so you can sell it off the property, but again, that buyer then assumes the stewardship responsibility of the hay and manure for not being used for compost, and the grazing cleanouts if they move them to a sensitive crop. Okay, so Invora, this is a product that is brand new this year. Those of you that have been around long enough to have heard us and maybe DuPont talk about MAT 28, this is the product that has MAT 28 in it. The aminocyclopyrrochlor, that's what MAT 28 is. So Invora is a combination of the aminocyclopyrrochlor and triclopiramine. EPA issued grazing label early in 2020. It is a restricted use herbicide. You will have to have a license to buy it. The TDA approved Texas registration. In 2020, it's only available in 30-gallon drums. And that's to ensure that the special training that's required is in place, and that there's a smooth rollout. We're going to talk about the special training here in a minute. In 2021, Bear's intent is to provide smaller container size. If they have a smooth rollout, no hiccups this year. So that's their intent for next year. And that's going to affect, that container size is going to affect whether or not you want to get a license, do that special training, how soon you want to do that. Okay, so in our guide, in our EM 1466 brush and weed guide, we have approved it for broadcast applications on mesquite and huisache, and then for individual plant leaf spray applications on several species. You can see down at the bottom there: mesquite, huisache, whitebrush, agarita, catclaw, Texas mountain laurel, Texas persimmon. And then we've also approved it for stem spray and cut stump in water as the carrier. Those are all applications that we have approved, put in our publication. Okay, so the required training. Prior to application on rangeland, all applicators must complete picolinic acid training every 2 years. So the training can be completed through Extension Service. There's an online course that you can take right now if you wanted to. What I anticipate is that there might be some face-to-face training on this training in the future, but right now there is an online training that can be taken. Bear can, the company that produces Envora, they can provide the training. A certified applicator has to keep records for 3 years after they get the license, and you have to renew the training. You have to renew that training every 2 years. The training is not that difficult, but you do have to have that training certificate renewed. So you don't have to have the certificate to buy the Envora, but you do have to have the certificate to be legal to apply it. And what I would suggest to you, most of you are if you were going to use this product, you're probably going to want the smaller containers. So I would suggest that you wait closer to when the smaller containers are available, because if you took the training right now, you can't use it till next year if the smaller containers come out, and you'd lose all that from now till, say, next spring on your training certificate. So just wait till closer to when it's available in small. Is my suggestion. Okay, so the Envora is not the only picolinic acid, but it is the only one right now that requires this training. But you can see here that besides the aminocyclopyrrochlor and triclopyr, there's aminopyrrolide, clopyrrolide, which are in Sendero. There's picloram, which is in Tordon 22K, fluoroxypyr that's in Surmount, picloram and fluoroxypyr that are in Surmount. So there are several. So these chemicals on the left are all picolinic acids, but EPA has chosen to initiate this training for this particular product with its issuing that grazing label. All right, so there is manure and vegetation management requirement if you're using Envora, and really it's not, the requirements are not that once you look at them, they're not that stringent. The product is only labeled for rangeland. It is not labeled for hay production. You cannot use it on hayland. You can use it on privately owned, non-hayed rangeland or perennial grasslands that are managed as rangelands. You can't remove the herbaceous vegetation, in other words, the grass, for 2 years following treatment. You can't use the grass or any vegetation for or manure for compost for 2 years after you make the application. And I guess the question I have is, how many people on rangeland go around picking up manure for compost in their garden? I don't think I see it very often. The woody plants have to degrade on site. And then again, there's a clean out, a 3-day clean out. If you're going to move to a site that's not non-hayed rangeland, for example, if you wanted to move to a Bermuda grass hayfield, a field that would be hayed at some point, you have to do that clean out before you move to that pasture. And then manure has to stay in place. So, you know, we don't harvest wood for take it to recycling centers and things like that. So it's really no problem with leaving the woody vegetation to degrade on site. So really, if you look at these requirements, they're not they're spelled out, but they're not that restrictive. Okay, land ownership, privately owned or operated lands. If it's leased, the landowner has to be notified, and there has to be 2 years remaining on the lease before the application is made. So for example, if there's a 5-year lease, you could apply it no later than the 3rd year of the lease. A 10-year lease, no later than the 8th year. And that's to allow that 2 years of vegetation management that's required on the label. Okay, there are buffer zones, indications on the label, which are pretty explicit. So for property lines, aerial and ground broadcast have to have a 100-foot buffer, and that's to avoid drift onto your neighbor. For individual plant treatment, you can go up to the fence line if your neighbor is okay with it. Free-flowing water, there's a 100-foot buffer around those kinds of bodies of water. That's to avoid drift into the water, and also maintaining wildlife corridors and riparian areas. But mainly it's for the water, drift into the water. As far as individual plant treatment, you can go up to the water's edge on these free-flowing streams. Non-free-flowing water, like a tank, if the whole tank is within the treatment site, you can go to the water's edge with aerial or ground broadcast. If you share that tank with a neighbor, then you have to adhere to that 100-foot buffer. Again, that's to avoid drift into that common water source. IPT, you can go to the water's edge. All right, so these are pretty well spelled out on the Envora label. And just to kind of put things in perspective, these on this table right here, these are broadcast downwind adjustments for other herbicides. So for example, anything that has 2,4-D in it is going to have a 250-foot downwind adjustment if there are sensitive structures downwind, like water, non-target species. Other products like the Duracore have half a swath downwind adjustment. Chaparral, Mesaview, Sendero, 50 feet. Tordon and Surmount. Those labels are not specific. They just say adjustment for potential drift. But all these labels do have indications that drift has to be taken into account. Okay, so I'm going to just pause here for a second and see, I know I just gave you a lot of information about those herbicides. See if there's any questions before we go ahead.
Anybody have any questions about what he covered so far? Hold on, Bob. We got to try a little. I'll get you next. He wants to know what the mix is for IPT on Envora.
Okay, well, it's typically 1.5% for IPT leaf spray.
So 1.5% for IPT leaf spray.
Correct. Now for persimmon, we bumped it up to 2% because it was more consistent. You'll get good kill at 1.5 on persimmon, but we got better kill with 2% on persimmon. But for all those other species that were listed there, it's typically 1.5% leaf spray.
My question is on like Sendero and Remedy and all that. You were talking about after you mixed it and lost it expecting it. What about if you open the jug and use half of it? What's the shelf life on what's left?
Okay, I think I understood the question. It's if you have Sendero, Remedy, or whatever, and once you open the jug, what's the shelf life? It's as long as it doesn't get frozen or start to precipitate. You know, if you pick up the jug and you hear there's sediment in the jug, then it's you got a problem. But they keep for quite a long time on the shelf, as long as they're protected from freezing and, you know, just terribly hot temperatures. So if I were worried about it, I'd just pour a little bit in some water and see if it mixes. Make sure if it's Sendero, for example, pour it in water, make sure it mixes. Okay, doesn't settle out. If it's Remedy, you can mix it in water. And if it turns cloudy, doesn't settle out, you're okay. Or if you're going to put it in diesel, you can try with Remedy. You can try the diesel as a, you know, just a little test to make sure. But it should last quite a long time.
Did you use water and Remedy on small mesquites and have some success?
Very little success. You're going to be looking at about 0 to 35% kill. Remedy by itself has not been effective as a leaf spray. We've tried it. That's one of the reasons it's not in our guide. I mean, although we have things in our guide that are low kill, and part of the reason for that is that guide is really a reference guide. They're not all necessarily recommendations, but they're things that we've tried that we know what the kill rate was. And so we've got some treatments in there that have a low kill rate. And so that's really information for you to decide, is that the kind of kill rate you want or not? But we've never put Remedy as a leaf spray in there because it does have a low kill rate. So you're better off with Sendero. Sendero gives us more consistent kill than even Remedy and Reclaim. And of course, now you'd have to buy a generic of Reclaim.
So if, say you got a bottle that's been frozen or is separated, does it do any good to try to reconstitute that and get it mixed back together, or just throw it away?
Throw it away.
Properly.
Yes. Dispose of it properly.
Stanley Miller brought us in some huge distaff thistle, getting pretty bad in some areas down here, like covering up whole bottoms, or, you know, old fields that have been turned into coastal fields and stuff like that, and places that have some extra grazing on it maybe. So what's the best way to get rid of like thistle? Distaff thistle is the one that Stanley was mainly wanting to know about, because he showed me some pictures. I can't show them to everybody, but he told me to put it on the computer, and I didn't know how to do that. So I'm asking. I should have let.
Yeah, I know the plant. I know the plant you're talking about, And I saw a huge stand over in Mason County last year. The distaff or any of those thistles, distaff is an annual, but it's going to come back from seed, and it's going to, the first thing you're going to see in late fall, maybe early winter, you're going to see some little tiny seedlings growing on the ground. So the best time to hit those thistles, any thistle, is when they're in that seedling to rosette stage, before they start that stem elongation, before they push, make a stem. That's when you've got the best, you're going to get the best control. And really, any broadleaf herbicide can take them out. Even 2,4-D does a pretty good job. We did a little demonstration over in Menard County, and we did P+D, Chaparral, Grazon Next. Can't remember what the other one was, but right now, but all of them did a good job. The Next did a better job probably than the 2,4-D did. But any broadleaf herbicide can do a good job. So 2,4-D, I'd say a quart to the acre. If you're looking at Next, 24 ounces to the acre. Oh yeah, P+D was the other one. P+D, it's going to give you a good kill, quart to the acre. So, but you need to hit them when they're in that rosette, that seedling or rosette stage. That's probably going to be December, January. So go to the area where you had the thistle problem before and start looking for those in the late fall. And then time your application.
I think the main deal is the timing on it. I mean, I think there's several chemicals that work on it, but like all those tough, hard to get rid of plants, it's the timing when you get it in the small stages when it first comes out. That's what he's saying.
Right. Yeah, there's some exceptions. I mean, like for example, silverleaf nightshade and bull nettle, you want to hit them when they're blooming, but these other, the thistles, all the thistles, you want to hit them when they're in the rosette stage. Try to get them no later than rosette. Try to get them before that stem starts to come up. They can still be killed, but it's harder to kill them.
We got a couple of online questions. What kills cockleburs, weesatch, and what is good for that treatment? So, kill cocklebur and weesatch.
The weesatch, it kind of depends on how you're going to go about it. You can, let's just say individual plant treatment on weesatch. You can use stem sprays, cut stumps with Remedy or triclopyr ester and diesel. You can use a leaf spray with Grazon P+D or Sendero. P+D is going to be cheaper, but a leaf spray, you want to make sure that you've got good soil moisture and the plants are in good condition. If we go broadcast, we've got a couple of options that are, one is Sendero Tordon as a broadcast. And then the Invora is also an option, broadcast. Okay, so you wanted cocklebur, right? Let me see. Right off the top of my head, I can't remember about cocklebur, but I'll pull it up here and I'll find out.
There we go. Now I can hear you.
I can't see it. Sorry. Where are we on here? What kills, is that mullein?
Oh, mullein?
L-L-E-I-N, yeah, mullein.
Yeah. I'd probably hit it with P+D, and I would bump the surfactant up. Instead of a 1/4% surfactant, I'd use a 0.5% of surfactant.
are waxy,
Well, it's a
correct?
real hair.
And then the hair.
Yeah.
About, how long do you have to keep cattle off of pasture after 2,4-D?
There's no restriction.
Okay, what can you use on blackberry vines and when should you spray them?
Okay. Let me look up the Kuykendall first. You hit me with some things that I don't keep on the tip of my tongue.
Me.
Okay, the Kuykendall, you can go after it with any broadleaf herbicide. You want to go after it when it's young.
The tough ones, they gotta hit them at the right stage, correct?
Hit them when they're young, yes. Okay.
Hey, when do you need to get both sides of the leaf? And should it be just moist or very wet?
Are we talking, what species?
Prickly pear?
Oh. You'd like to get both sides of every pad if you can. And typically, if you go around a colony, you're going to get both sides of most pads.
So like dripping wet or just?
No, just to the point where it run off.
I think it's saying, what do you spray for greenbrier?
Okay, greenbrier. The most effective thing that we've got for greenbrier, stem spray with Remedy, triclopyr ester at 25% in diesel. So 1 quart of triclopyr ester, 3 quarts of diesel, stem spray. That's the most effective. Okay, so back to the blackberry. You can use either Surmount or you can use Pasture Guard HL. And Surmount, if you're going to do spot sprays, it's 1 to 2%. If you're going to use Pasture Guard, it's 0.5 to 1% on the blackberry.
Got one more live one in here. Let's see. Then we'll get you started on the next part of it.
Is there anything that would kill cedar when it's in a small stage, knee high or less?
Anything? Cedar?
Cedar, yes.
Okay, well, it depends on which cedar we're talking about. I mean, if it's blueberry,
Juniper.
ash juniper,
Yes, sir.
okay. That's the easiest plant. That's the easiest woody plant in the world to deal with. You can grub it. I mean, you don't have to use a herbicide. You can use herbicides. You can use Velpar, as a spot spray on the ground, direct, undiluted. You can use Tordon 22K as a leaf spray, but you've got to paint it, So if you don't, it just depends on whether you want to use a herbicide or not. But you don't have to. You can grub it. You just get all the green. It's done for. You can even use a weed eater or a brush, kind of a brush cutter. What I thought I understood was the small stuff, correct?
All right. I think that's it. So yeah, it was mentioned that's the blueberry cedar, not the redberry cedar.
Right.
That you can use for mechanical use. That was the question.
Okay.
All right, ready to move on to the next part. We'll go and then we'll get some more at the end.
Okay. All right. So spike, we're going to look at some information about that herbicide. It's the active ingredient is tebuthyron, spike 20P, 20% tebuthyron. It's a pelleted herbicide, non-restricted use, and non-selective. So the non-selective is an important part there. It won't kill everything, but you need to be careful around desirable plants. Okay. For broadcast applications, it's typically applied with an airplane or a helicopter with a special hopper that can meter out the spike. It's really tough on the ground to meter it out as a broadcast application. It does come in 5-gallon containers with a dispenser on top, and that dispenser puts out about 1/4 of an ounce every time you dispense the pellets. So that's a pretty good way to do the individual plant treatments, because the rates are given in ounces of product per 45 square feet or 100 square feet, depending on the species. But that's a good way to do these dispensers, a good way to do the IPT. Okay, so you don't want to apply it near desirable woody plants, and I'll show you an example here in a minute or two. Directly to water, where you've got bedrock that's continuously exposed, and you got a little bit up there in Llano County is like that, where the bedrock is underlain by shallow or continuous soils, and where you've got protected groundwater recharge zones. So we have to be careful about those areas. All right, this is spike applied too close to an oak tree. You have to stay at least 3 canopy diameters height or canopy diameters away from a desirable tree. It doesn't move a whole lot. It can move, but it doesn't move like Velpar does. But okay, so it's effective after rainfall moves it into the root zone. The plants are going to show yellowing and browning and then defoliation. The control is going to be achieved in anywhere from 1 to several years. So what you're going to see is the plants will go through defoliation cycles. They'll defoliate and then they'll try to come back, and you'll think it didn't work, and but they'll go through those cycles. You want to leave those treated plants or intact plants alone for 2 years after application. Don't disturb them, because they're still, that spike is still there. It's got a 12 to 15 month half-life, so it stays around for quite a while. So you want to leave those plants alone for at least 2 years after you make the application. Okay, so there is a potential for movement with flowing water, with wind, or mechanically. In other words, if you went in and you picked up soil that was treated with, move it that way. So you want to avoid areas where you got overland flow that might move the spike or soil, and then where you might have wind erosion that causes soil movement. So for vulnerable sites, sandy soils, shallow water table, the rate is 5 to 10 pounds of pellets once every 3 years. Other sites, we can go up to 20 pounds of pellets every 3 years, or you could put 2 treatments that total 30 pounds of pellets in any 6-year period. So, but you are limited on, you can't put it out every year on the same site, same place. And spot treatments can go up to 30 pounds of pellets per acre when it's needed. That's the way it's stated on the label, when needed, which is a little bit vague, but that's the way it's on the label. Okay, the way they respond, soil texture, depth, and organic matter have an effect. If we get poor control and erratic results when we have more than 5% organic matter and when we have more than 30% clay in the soil. So heavy soils, we're going to get poor control. Other deep soils or medium soils, where we got deep-rooted woody plants, we need increased rates because of the size of the plants. For shallow soils, rocky soils with lower organic matter, we use lower rates. So what we see is with these plants, with taller plants and more dense plants, that's an indication that we have deep, medium, or fine textured soils. And when you have that situation, you want to use increased rates. So the reason I'm talking about increased or decreased rates, and in our guide, sometimes it'll give a range of pounds of pellets per acre. So you want to gauge that by the kind of vegetation and growing conditions or soils that you've got. So we've got shorter plants, less dense. We're going to use a lower rate. And in terms of timing, we get the best results prior to the active growing season. So for our area of the state, October 1 to April 1 is typically the time frame that we would apply spike. Out in the Trans-Pecos, May 1 to July 1. So you want to trying to get ahead of when that rainy season would be coming in, so you get that spike moved into the soil. And after dozing or shredding, you have to wait until you got about 5 feet of regrowth or more before application. So spike's activity is dependent on having a plant up there to pull the spike into the plant. So if you don't have a leaf material, you don't have a plant there, it's not going to be able to pull the spike out of the soil. So as it shows here, you want about 5 foot of growth if you've gone in and dozed or shredded before you make an application. Okay, so the specific rates for different species, for specific species, are that we know are in our ERM 1466 Chemical Weed and Brush Control Reference Guide for rangeland. And you can download this from the agrilifebookstore.org. It's a PDF publication. It's free. And it's, you can put it on your computer. You can put it on your iPad. If you've got a big enough phone screen, you can put it on your phone, and it's searchable. In fact, when I got the question about the cocklebur that I didn't remember, I went to my iPad and looked it up there. So it's a really good publication. We just revised it in May. The major revision was inclusion of the Envora applications, but we did do some other, we added Mesaview in this new version. And we had one of the Sendero Tordon broadcast application for Weesatch was also added to this version. So it's got some new information in it. And we revise this every so often as needed. Lately, it's been pretty often. Okay, so I'm gonna just stop and see if there are any questions. If not, then I'll be done.
Questions on coastal fields, but you want Larry to answer those, or you want to take a shot at them?
Is it brush on coastal or what?
Well, weeds.
Okay, let Larry answer that.
That's what I figured. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, I could answer it, but
Well, We'll let Larry have his fun at it.
Yeah.
Any other ones? Let's see, what do you spray for willow baccharis?
Okay. Willowbacterus, we've got a whole bunch of options. And I'm guessing you're talking about IPT. If you're talking about broadcast, the main one we've got is 2,4-D, which gives us, you know, not the best control, but that's what we've got. Individual plant treatment, we can do leaf spray with Remedy at 1%. We can use Surmount at 1%. We can use Pasture Guard HL at 0.5% concentration as a leaf spray. We can also do stem spray with Remedy in diesel or triclopyr ester in diesel, or we could do cut stump with triclopyr ester in diesel. So we've got a whole bunch of options, and all those options are listed in that 1466.
Very good publication. So I'll get, hey, can I, quick question, can I get your presentation for those of, you email that to me so I can send it out to the ones that want it with all that good information you have on there?
Sure, yeah.
So if for some reason you want Bob's presentation, his slides, he'll email that to me and then just call the office and we'll get it emailed to you. Or we can print it out. You can come pick it up at the office if that works better for you also. So didn't want to forget that. Okay, next one, spraying fence lines. What is a good spray to use?
Okay, it kind of depends on what's in the fence line. And I like to tailor the spray to what's in the fence line. Now, when Envora is available in smaller containers, that's going to be a good fence line option for you, because all those species that we showed there that it controls. I mean, it's hard to believe you can spray agarita, leaf spray agarita, and kill it. I mean, it's deadly on agarita. So it kind of what's in the fence line, but if you've got mesquite, you want Sendero. Say right now where for example, Envora is not available. One good approach that we've taken that we've looked at in the past is 2% Surmount. That does a pretty good job across a lot of species. It won't kill nothing's going to kill everything, but that's a pretty good product or approach. That 2% Surmount takes out a lot of plants. But you can also tailor it more. If you've got mesquite, you might want Sendero in there. If you had mesquite and prickly pear, Sendero and picloram together. So kind of depends on what you've got in the fence line. Now, Envora probably won't do a very good job on the prickly pear. So if you had prickly pear, again, you'd want to tailor. You want to put some picloram in there probably. So, but this year, unless you bought a 30-gallon drum or had some left over from an aerial job that was done, you're not going to have that product available this year. So, and we're also getting pretty late in the year to be doing leaf sprays on a lot of places, as dry as it's getting.
Next, got one more online. It says, is 2,4-D a very dangerous herbicide since I have to get permission to use it?
Okay, 2,4-D is a state limited herbicide. It's not restricted use by the EPA, but it is state limited. And the reason it's state limited is because of cotton. So if you're not in a cotton county, it's not an issue. And as far as dangerous, 2,4-D is rapidly degraded in the soil. It has a half-life of 10 to 14 days. soil microbes degrade it rapidly. So it doesn't stay around very long. It doesn't have soil residual, doesn't stay around very long. The biggest danger with any herbicide is going to be drifting onto something you don't want it to hit, so that's controlled by, wind speed and droplet size and those kinds of things. Just being careful. But
Got one more over.
go ahead.
Work on yucca and different plants along a fence line, mostly yucca.
Yucca, you can use triclopyr ester or remedy in diesel as a whirl spray. 15% remedy or triclopyr ester in diesel, and you spray in each whirl for 2 seconds. You can also use the herbicide directly, undiluted, but it's going to be cheaper if you mix it with the diesel.
You don't have any result demonstration or any information on using Embora on yucca yet, or is that?
Hang on just a second. Okay. Yeah. Invora at 1.5% will give you, our rating is high to very high kill, which means anywhere from 55 to 100, 56 to 100% kill, somewhere in that range. It's a wide range, but and the time is late spring and summer when you got mature, healthy leaves.
That's a foliar spray.
Yes, it is.
You need a surfactant or oil in it.
Yeah, you want a surfactant in there. You want a 0.25% non-ionic surfactant.
Will be better.
With what?
A crop oil with surfactant, or surfactant's the best way to go?
A crop oil will be fine. Just with the crop oil, just make sure that they look at the label and mix it according to the label, the product label. Because some of those will say like a 1% concentration of the crop oil for IPT. They're different, so the surfactants, the non-ionic surfactants, they're, we know 0.25 to 0.5%, but these crop oils just need to look at the label close, make sure you got the right rate. But there's nothing wrong with it.
All right, well, I think that's it, Mr. Bob. We certainly appreciate it. I got one more quick one.
Okay.
Is Grazon P plus D still available?
Yes, as far as I know. There was, my understanding is initially there was a plan to phase it out, but I believe that plan was scrapped. So as far as I know, it's still available.
Is there a generic form of Grazon P plus D?
Gunslinger. Gunslinger.
So, Mr. Bob, thank you. By the way, he was coming, but he's got a boot on. He's got a cast on. He had an infection getting his foot. So instead of driving 3.5 hours with his right foot, with his boot off, he elected to stay home, and we certainly understand. But we want to thank you. Very, very grateful for the opportunity to get to listen to you, and we appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you. All right, I'm gonna sign off then.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna take a quick break here in just a second, but I want to read off our sponsors for this year right quick. Anapro, Bamert Seed Company, Capital Farm Credit, Kim Air, Cortiva, AgriScience, Jordan Cattle Auction, LCRA, Llano Feed Supply, Missy Feeds, M&D Aerial, Mustang Equipment, and Turner Seeds. Let's give them a round of applause. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this here, what we do right there. There's some of them in the back, some of them couldn't make it, so we are going to take a break until it's 38 now, 10:38, so let's say 15 minutes from now. We are going to give you a little chance, a break here, so we can go back and see those guys and get up and stretch. And we'll see you here in a little bit online. Take a break. All right, we're getting ready to get to going again. So again, thank you to all of our sponsors and stuff that come today, and the ones that weren't able to make it, but still helping sponsor this Big Range Field Day this year. We're certainly very appreciative of that. All right, next we have Dr. Larry Redmond. He's going to come to us and talk about ways to improve our range.
Where'd you go, Jamie? I can't hear you anymore.
We can't hear anyone anymore.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I heard that.
This is Larry Redmond. So you can hear me, but I can't hear Jamie at all.
Yeah, I can hear you, Larry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I can hear you too, Larry. It's Bob.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. I don't know what happened on
Yeah.
Jamie's end.
Oh, he's entering the room now.
And I'm looking at the chat to see. All I see is about the audio is not working.
I'm not getting that. I'm not.
Jamie, can you unmute?
I think we can hear you now.
Okay. We lost your audio. I don't know what happened, but are you ready to start?
Everything lined back out and back on going.
Something really bad.
He said something really bad going on, so I don't know. Trying to see. Let's see. Talking.
Can you hear us now, Larry?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Try and just see. There's some static going through some of them, and some's not perfect, but we don't have. I don't hear any static in here, do you, when he talks? No, it's coming through real clear on our end. So, all right, if you're ready, Larry, we've already got some questions for you too, so that shows how we already got them wrote down and ready for you.
That's pretty good because I hadn't even started yet. So you want to go ahead and ask the questions or not? Well, we'll go ahead and move forward. So, well, now we're froze up, Jamie.
I knew it would like take too long.
Hey,
Too good.
well,
It's on.
hey, Larry, will you ask everyone or anyone in the chat that's in here, let us know what your audio quality is?
Okay, we're working now. So can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you, do you hear static on your end, or is it okay?
No, I don't hear anything on my end.
Okay,
I mean, it's static. I don't hear any static.
we'll just go ahead and push through.
All right. All right, here we go. We'll see if it works. It's working. All right, so I was just thinking about this a while ago. I'm kind of a simple guy, and so I try to make things simple so that I can understand it and hopefully other people can understand it. So I've got this broken down into 3 different aspects for forage management. So let's talk about what it takes for photosynthesis. And by the way, Jamie, there'll be a little test at the end of the presentation on this, so y'all make good notes. But the thing I want to point out, there's a lot of things goes on in photosynthesis, but there's things that are important, such as light and other things like water. You got to have carbon dioxide, and then we've got to have green photosynthetic material to actually carry on the photosynthesis. So with that sort of backdrop, let's talk a little bit about the drought. This is what the state of Texas looked like back during the historic drought of 2011. Hope we don't ever see that again. But we've already got some places in the state that are starting to look pretty sad. And if you look up in the Panhandle, High Plains right now, they're in some pretty severe drought. They're not in the exceptional drought category yet, but it's pretty dry. But if you just look at that, what they call species one, that figure A and then figure B, that kind of gives you an indication of how drought affects root growth and production. And if we don't have root growth and production, then we're going to have limited top growth and production, which also then limits more or limits further root growth and production. So if we look at this, I downloaded this just the other day and was looking at it, and you can see that there's some, like I said, there's some spots up there in the High Plains that are starting to look pretty dry. But then we've got a lot of the state that's starting to show some pretty significant dry areas. And so, you know, if you look at the forecast though, through September 30, I mean, they're showing that we're going to have drought in the High Plains and you know, West Texas, but you know, Llano County and that part of the plateau or the uplift, the basin, whatever you want to refer to it as, that looks pretty good, you know, if these guys are right. But still in all, it's been pretty dry. And so if we think about moisture, and I always ask people if they can impact how much moisture their forage plants get, then of course a lot of times the response is no, we can't affect how much water falls out of the sky. But it's not how much falls out of the sky, but it's how much do you get to keep on your property. And so people from Range Science, Larry White, Baron Rector, Brian Hayes, they went out and did some collecting in the winter, and they were looking at how much forage residue was remaining in different pastures out in the Edwards Plateau area. And, you know, look at one guy there had 100 pounds of dry matter per acre in January. You think, well, so why does that matter? Because it's January, warm season grasses are not growing. But what it indicates is the guy's grazing management philosophy. And so the interesting thing about it is he had very little forage left in the pastures in January. He had used up basically everything Mother Nature had given him. And he received about 17 inches of rain during that growing season the next year. If you look at the next aspect of that, there's a neighbor out there that had 1,500 pounds of forage remaining in his pasture on that same day, and he received about half the water. And yet if you look at the amount of forage that he produced that year, it was over twice, well, it was right at twice what the other guy had produced. And so the riddle, if you will, is how do you produce twice the forage with half the water? And the answer is by leaving grass in the pasture. What limited rainfall occurred, he was able to keep it on his property. I heard one guy say one time he made his place a sponge. And he did, because the guy with 100 pounds of forage remaining in the pasture, he got 17 inches of rain. A lot of that left his property in runoff. The guy that had 1,500 pounds had a sponge for a piece of property. What limited water came stayed on his place, and he was able to utilize that. So when we ask the question about water, can we impact how much water our forage plants get to use? The answer is yes, because we do that with our grazing management. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But so the number one aspect is not the oil well, although that's handy. The number one aspect is water. And if we don't get water, then all bets are off. And there's not anything that we can do not to have water, even if you're irrigating. And there's some people starting to experience this right now. They're trying to irrigate and make hay. But as we experienced in 2011 in the High Plains, we had people that were irrigating their cotton. They were putting enough water on to grow 4 bale cotton. they were only producing 2 bales of cotton. So you can irrigate, but you're going to lose a lot of that water to evapotranspiration. There's nothing like a good rainstorm. So anyway, number one aspect is water. Second aspect, for those of you that may have fertilizer or some other introduced forages, and I tell people all the time that if you have Bermuda grass, and there's a number of people out that way, you start to get on the fringe area of where Bermuda grass is adapted and will perform for you. But if you have any kind of a hay crop or Bermuda grass for grazing or hay, you simply have to fertilize. And that there's no way of getting around that. I tell people all the time, if you have a Bermuda grass based operation, you have inadvertently entered into a contract with your fertilizer distributor, because in the absence of fertilizer, Bermuda grass will not persist. Now, there are others that will persist under grazing scenario. And that could be Klein grass, it could be some of the old world blue stems, WWB doll, some of those. But when we're talking about hay crops, we simply have to soil test and apply the right amount of fertilizer. Fertilizer prices have gone up. They had historical insane highs during 2008, and it was an amazing thing to look at. But we can't do anything about the fertilizer prices, but we can do something about how efficiently we use them. So I showed this picture to a room full of about 80 one night, asked them to tell me what I was doing, and nobody could tell me what I was doing there, which was a little frightening. I thought they were maybe all friends of my daughter. And I kind of quit saying that because there was a lady challenged me one night. She said, well, whose fault is that your daughter did? Well, anyway. So, yeah, that engine oil dipstick is a simple yet very, very profound tool, because it gives us two really important pieces of information. Number one, it tells us, do we have enough oil in the crankcase to get the job done? And number two, if there's not enough oil in there, then that dipstick gives us an indication of how much we need to add to bring it back up to, an acceptable level. So when we're talking about fertilizer, a soil test is nothing more than the dipstick for your soil, because what you're doing is you're getting two very important pieces of information out of that soil test, just like the dipstick. You're getting information about, do I have enough nutrients in the ground to get the job done? So if I want to grow a hay crop, it's going to require a certain level of nutrients. Do I have enough nutrients in the ground to take care of that? And if I don't, then the soil test tells me how much I need to apply in order to bring that up to the acceptable level. You cannot guess about how much fertilizer to apply. Now, if you're grazing and you're not taking a lot of nutrients out of the ground, some of these forages, like I said, Klein grass, some of the old world blue stems, those kinds of things, don't require any fertilizer just to graze, because we're not removing a lot of nutrients. But Bermuda grass, under any circumstance, or any hay crop, you are removing a lot of nutrients with a hay crop. And you're taking them out of the ground, you're taking them somewhere else, another pasture, another county, who knows where that might be going. And so when we're talking about hay crops, it is critically important to use the soil test to determine how much to apply. And if I don't do that, over time, what I'll wind up doing is depleting the nutrients out of that ground, and I can get to a point where I cannot afford to bring that back up to a productive level. And so you want to be careful with those hay crops. Now, talking about fertilizer, again, under grazing, there's not a lot of fertilizer required, except if you have Bermuda grass. Again, if you have Bermuda grass, it can be a wonderful, wonderful grass, especially for hay. I think it's the best hay crop where it will grow, because you get a better response to your fertilizer dollar than with other forages. But again, if you're growing hay of any kind, then you need to be sure and soil test every year and apply those nutrients based on that soil test recommendation. So then we get to our third aspect, and we call it protection. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, how we need sunlight, solar radiation to drive. That's what the energy comes from, to drive this photosynthetic reaction that we're interested in. And so when we're thinking about sunlight, we need to be able to protect our forage plants from the weeds or other things that can intercept the sunlight rather than the forage plants. I ask people all the time, you know, can you impact how much sunlight your forage plants get? Well, the answer typically is no, you can't, but no, you can. Because if you look there on the left-hand side of that photo there, and this is a great fence line contrast, you can see that on the left-hand side where the weed pressure is so high, the weeds are the ones that are receiving and intercepting the sunlight, the solar radiation. So they're able to photosynthesize, but the forage grasses down underneath that canopy are not receiving enough sunlight. And so they're going to suffer. They're not going to grow top growth. They're not going to grow roots. And so over time, we can actually destroy those plants. On the right-hand side of that fence line there, you can see that we've got the weeds basically under control, and the forage grass is able to receive the sunlight that it needs to drive photosynthesis. So with heavy weed pressure, you're going to inhibit photosynthesis. You're going to reduce any kind of recovery. Sometimes we go through drought, and warm season grasses will get weakened because of that drought. We've got a bunch of weeds standing up on top. They're going to be slow to recover. And so typically under good growing conditions, we think about using a herbicide, because herbicide is actually going to help you manage the weeds. If we're under drought conditions, we don't usually apply herbicides under drought conditions, because you want a plant growing well so that when you apply the herbicide, that herbicide will then move, be translocated to either, you know, the root, the crown, the growing points, whatever the mode of action might be for that herbicide. But you want to be able to move that herbicide through the plant and destroy the plant. Under droughty conditions, a lot of times it's hard to even get the herbicide into the plant, much less move it around like we like to do with the herbicide. Sometimes we have to mow. I don't like mowing under any circumstance. It's expensive. It does not manage weeds. You mow the weeds in 2-3 weeks, it looks just like it did before you mowed it. And so sometimes under droughty conditions, we don't have any other choice, because if we can't use the herbicide, we need to keep the weeds from getting up on top and forming this canopy over the top and intercepting then the sunlight that those forage plants need. We also know that those weeds are going to also be using a lot of moisture during these drought conditions. And so another reason to keep them under control as best we can, given the growing conditions. So I always show this. This is old data, but it's still pretty relevant. It compares mowing and not even talking about the aspect of not being able to manage the weeds, but just looking at the difference in cost. And typically it's less expensive to use herbicide versus mowing. Again, under drought conditions, you may be forced to mow. The other thing we need to remember is some people overseed their Bermuda grass with winter pasture. Now, it's a lot more common as you get east of Interstate 35, but people still do this, and a lot of times they're not in tune with when they need to have that winter pasture removed, because just like weeds, winter pasture can intercept sunlight, it can intercept or get the moisture out of the ground if you have limited moisture. This is a very well old established coastal Bermuda grass field I took a picture of in June of 2000. It had a pretty wet, dry spring that year. And the owner had a combination of rye and ryegrass planted on top. It's a great combination for those sandy soils in East Texas. But what he failed to do was get rid of the ryegrass in a timely manner. And this is what happened to his Bermuda grass. He actually destroyed most of that field because if that's what your grass looks like in June, you're out of the Bermuda grass business in that field. And so again, just like weeds, we need to be able to manage those. And the trigger for that is when nighttime temperatures are consistently 60 degrees. Warm season grass is starting to make active growth, and you need to have your winter pasture gone pretty quickly. And best way to do that is graze it out, because you're going to plant it again next year. But if you get caught for some reason, like this guy was caught, didn't have enough cattle to manage it, so he just let it go. Take it as a hay crop if you have to, but you need to have it off of that warm season grass as that warm season grass starts to wake up and starts to make active growth late winter, early spring. So let's talk about protecting that green leaf tissue. We talked about trying to help it with sunlight. Let's talk about protection. You remember we talked about protecting the green photosynthetic material, because you got to have that. This is why stocking rate is so important. If we graze it down right down to the soil surface, there's no photosynthetic material left to photosynthesize. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But what I want to talk about is things that can go out and defoliate and put our plants in peril, if you will. And so grasshoppers are one of the first. And when you look at some things that have been written about grasshoppers, the thing that I think is important is that third bullet. It says, even a moderate infestation of 10 hoppers per square meter, think square yard, can typically consume up to 60% of the available forage. Now, grasshoppers are typically worse during dry years. Apparently, there's some fungal things that help manage their population a little bit in a little bit wetter environment. But we're dry, so I would expect to start seeing a lot of hoppers. And we've seen hopper infestations that have been 30 and 40 per square meter. And I remember in 2011, as a matter of fact, I was visiting a piece of property. A lady had bought a new piece of property adjacent to their ranch. She wanted to show me her property. So we drove into the gate, and she got out, opened the gate. We drove into the new property, and this wave of grasshoppers got up ahead of us. I mean, I told somebody one time it looked like a Stephen King movie, but there was a tremendous amount of grasshoppers in there. And so I told her, just on the off chance, I said, get out there and find me a blade of grass. I want to look at it. And she looked and looked and looked and came back, because all that was left was the mid vein on these grass leaves, because the hoppers had consumed 100% of the forage in that pasture. And so we have to be able to respond and manage these grasshoppers. There's a lot of products, and a lot of you have probably used those things on the left. The one I really like, though, it's relatively new compared to the others, but it's been around now for a few years, but it's called Prevathon. And Prevathon is interesting because number one, it has no graying or haying restrictions. We like that. It also has some residual, and I'll show you a video, hopefully, that will play and indicate a little bit of that. But the other thing about it is, on every pesticide, there's what we call a signal word. And I think a while ago during Dr. Lyons' presentation, there was somebody asked a question about, the danger of 2,4-D. So if you look at any herbicide or any insecticide or fungicide or rodenticide or whatever it might be, when you look on there, there's a signal word. There's either caution, warning, or danger. And that indicates lethality to humans. I mean, you want to look at that. And if it's caution, then there's going to be a certain level of personal protective equipment required, versus if the one says danger, then you want to be really careful with those. Most insecticides have at least warning or danger on there, because a lot of them are very toxic to humans. So Prevathon's the first pesticide that has no signal word on the label, which indicates it's pretty safe for us, but it's pretty interesting how it works on the hoppers. So, okay, looks like the video is going to play. So if you can see this, you might can see the tremendous number of grasshoppers that are flying up ahead of Gerald Hobson there as he goes through this field with sweep net. Okay, so there's a number of hoppers. I'm going to say there's probably 20 or more per square meter. So if we look 2 weeks later, he's walking through that same field after they treated it with Prevathon, and you'll note there's not even a single hopper after 2 weeks. We've had some data that has been developed where we looked at this, and we've seen where even as far out as 4 weeks sometimes, we didn't see much in the way of reinfestation. Now, this is important because if you have a bad grasshopper problem and you treat it with one of those other products, those are contact insecticides. And what they do is if a drop falls on the grasshopper, it's going to kill it. But if your neighbor did not treat their grasshoppers and tomorrow your grasshoppers come into your pasture, then there's no protection from yesterday's spraying. So if you have something that can work and give you another 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so protection, I think that's really valuable, not to mention the fact that it's a safer product to use. Now, the mode of action on this is different because it's not a contact insecticide. What it is a systemic that moves into the grass. And the first bite that the grasshopper takes, or an fall armyworm, it locks up their jaws and they can't feed anymore. And so they're still going to be hopping around. They're still going to be wiggling and crawling around, but the damage has been stopped with the first bite, essentially. And so what this does is it sort of makes us think about when should we spray, you know, because if I spray my Prevathon today and then harvest that for hay tomorrow, all my Prevathon went in the bale and I have no protection. And so it's kind of you have to sort of think this one through a little bit more than just the standard contact insecticides. But it does work equally well or better on fall armyworms because the product was actually developed for worms in row crops, but it has excellent activity on fall armyworm as well. And then I guess our latest pest for introduced forages anyway is one called the Bermuda grass stem maggot. Some people have it and don't realize it because what they do is they look out and they see these dead tops on their Bermuda grass and they might, you know, think, well, that's maybe late frost, maybe it's a drought deal, maybe there was a little herbicide, you know, something, I don't know. But what it is this little fly, and that little fly is only 3/16 of an inch long. And so it's very difficult to even see the fly out there unless you're really looking. But see that little larva, the eggs hatch, the worm crawls into the stem and feeds on the inside of the stem. So everything from there up is dead. And so we just have to be aware of this. And unfortunately, there's not any really good treatment. We can do some things to manage, but these things are only suppression techniques. And so, you know, some things here, if the hay harvest is going to be within a week, go ahead and harvest, because one of the best ways to kill the larva is to dry the grass down, because they want to feed on fresh Bermuda grass. Finer leaf Bermuda grass seems to attract more of them, but they will still feed on Tifton 85 or jigs, something like that. Seems to be more impact on the second or third cutting, and also if growing conditions are poor. People in Georgia have said that they have experienced a 50% loss, and so it can be very significant. The other thing is just graze it, because when that cow grazes that grass and consumes that larva, he's dead. And so that's a good way to also get rid of that. But the way you manage is you look for the fly, and you go and get one of these pyrethroid insecticides and use the lowest level rate that they recommend and just spray. And you may have to spray multiple times to try to control that fly, because we're trying to control the fly. We don't have a way yet to control the larva. And I had hopes that maybe the Prevathon would work, but I'm told now after some trials that they did not see that as an effective treatment. Anyway, so we want to protect from all of these different insect pests, because it's just like having a whole bunch of other cows out there, because they're going to consume all of your forage if we're not careful. And then, finally, we need to think about protection from livestock, because a lot of operations are overstocked and some just can't help it. I had a good friend of mine and his wife over this past weekend, and he's partnered up with a younger guy, and he's letting this younger guy make all the decisions, and they're bad decisions. I mean, they need to reduce stocking right now. My friend knows they need to reduce the stocking, but he's let this young guy talk him into maintaining the stocking rate, and they've already essentially run out of grass, and hay in that part of the state is already $105 a bale. So I don't know what he's thinking. I mean, the guy is smarter than this, so I don't know what he's doing. But anyway, livestock typically is our biggest challenge. And, we've said over and over, the most critical factor in livestock production is the stocking rate. It matters not where you want to try to raise cattle, unless maybe you're in the Mojave Desert or something. But if you're stocked right for the forage system, for the environment, you can raise cattle successfully anywhere. Some of the best cattle country in the state of Texas is out in the Trans-Pecos, but only if it rains. And then, you have a whole lot more acres dedicated to an animal unit out there. So we talked a little bit about how defoliation affects root growth in production. And, you can remove about 50% of the leaf volume and not impact the root growth much. But once you start removing more than 50% of the forage, the leaf tissue, then you get into a situation where you can actually stop all root growth. And so now you have a plant that is not growing roots, not looking for moisture, not looking for nutrients, and it's certainly not growing anything else on top. So it's just a downward spiral. It's just a bad situation to get into. And that's why we try to talk to people about stocking rate over and over and over. It's not an exciting topic, but it is, again, it's the most critical factor. I mean, if you ask the veterinarians, they would say animal health and vaccinations and things like that would be. You can talk to animal scientists, and they would say breed, it makes all the difference. I get all that, and those things are important. But at the same time, if you're not stocked right, it doesn't matter what kind of breed you have or how healthy the animal is, because they're not going to perform. So here's a guy, took a picture of this in 2011. Here's a guy, his water's almost gone. These are commercial cows. There's not a blade of grass on his property. Hay's selling for over $100 a round bale. And, the question is, why does he still have cows there? I mean, I had a friend of mine in Oklahoma that didn't know much. She married a guy that was a custom combiner and had a big Brangus operation, and she was learning everything new, and she was faced with this situation in 1996. Categorized as the worst drought in Oklahoma in a century. And I said, well, you're going to have to get rid of some of those cattle or move them to another state or something. And she said, well, I can't do that. These are my babies. How many times you heard that? And I asked her, I said, are you into animal husbandry or are you into animal production? And most of the times people think about animal husbandry. They name their animals. They don't want to ever get rid of one of them. But, we need to be thinking more in terms of production. And sometimes we're faced with making really hard decisions. Now, this is a picture I took on the same day as the previous one. On the same day, on the same highway, and they were about 3 miles apart. So here's a different philosophy about grazing management. Here's a guy that has taken good care of his pasture. I mean, there's a weed that you can see at the very bottom of the screen. That's the only weed I can see out there, basically. That grass still has some green in it. He still has grass. Different philosophy. It's like the first figure we were talking about, a guy that had 100 pounds of dry matter per acre like this, he could get a big rain and it's going to run off. This guy, maybe he's the 1,500 pound of dry matter per acre, and he could get a little bit of rain and it's going to stay right there, because that grass that's remaining is going to slow down that overland flow of that runoff and allow that moisture to percolate and then infiltrate and then percolate through that soil. And so it's just, it's a tale of two different grazing management philosophies. And we need to just think about what we're doing, not only to the animal, but also to the forage. Here's another look at that guy's place that I took the first picture from. I mean, there's just nothing there. And so what are the animals grazing? They're not. They're eating hay, and that hay is costing, again, over $100 a bale. So when you get into the situation where you don't have much ground cover, then you start setting yourself up for a lot of other problems. And so when you think about topsoil, you know, it can take up to 1,000 years to create 1 inch of topsoil. And what happens with bare soil, there's a couple of photos there. So on the left-hand side is a close-up picture of the raindrop impact. And there's tremendous energy in a single raindrop. And when it hits bare soil, it takes good soil structure and pulverizes it, blows it up into very fine particles. And what you wind up with is this crust or surface ceiling that's on the right-hand side. See, a crust will never, you'll never see a crust under vegetation. You only see it on bare ground. And so once you experience this crust and you have this surface ceiling, now the runoff is made even worse because it doesn't have those pores that it used to have to help infiltrate moisture. Now that is sealed completely. So you don't capture your water if you have bare ground. And what you start experiencing is this picture here that I got from Mark Mosley. And this is a picture, I think was over in Hayes County. And the guy's sitting there looking at, you know, this pedestal plant. And it looks to me like there's 10 or 12,000 years of topsoil development that's been lost there. And the only thing that's holding that little dab of topsoil left or together is the roots on that particular plant. And so I ask people all the time, I ask my students, I show them this picture and I say, so let me ask a question, is topsoil even important? Well, the answer is right there in front of you. How much is growing on the subsoil? Nothing. Now, something will start to grow there eventually, but before we can return this to the productivity or productive site capability it once had, it's going to take several thousand years. So we do not want to get into that situation, and you get into that situation when you don't have good ground cover, and you get into that not having good ground cover by not paying attention to the stocking rate or the pest that come in and destroy your forage. And so we have to be careful about that. But besides losing your water and your topsoil, if you've got any fertilizer nutrients out there, that's going down the creek. Organic matter's being washed away. Pesticides are being washed away. And then there's bacteria. And if you don't think bacteria is a problem, you can visit with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, because they act as an EPA representative, and they looking at the Clean Water Act and how does that impact the state. And you can see that there are so many, half of the water body impairments in Texas are due to bacteria. Now, as you look at that picture, you can think about, okay, you guys in the West are doing a better job, right? Because all the bacterial impairments are in the east part of the state, right? Well, actually, that's where all the water is. So you're kind of exempted on that, but you can still have those problems about runoff and soil erosion and those kinds of things that will get you in trouble. And it's so difficult once you cross that threshold. It is so difficult to ever come back. And so kind of a summary slide, and then we'll take those questions that you were talking about, Jamie. There's three aspects. to managing forages. It's just that simple. We got to have water. If we have hay crops or Bermuda grass, we got to have fertilizer, and it needs to be applied based on soil test recommendation. Again, we can't do anything about the price of fertilizer, but we can darn sure do something about how efficiently that we use it. And then we need to think about forage protection. We need to protect our forages from weeds, from winter pasture, from insects, and of course, mostly from grazing livestock. So if we'll do all of this, if we'll maintain the appropriate forage residue level, and that's different if it's Bermuda grass versus rangeland, because if it's rangeland, we got to understand what the key species are and focus on them. And when they are grazed down to the appropriate height, we need to move the cattle and let those plants recover from those grazing events. But the appropriate residue level, protect the soil, capture your water, keep all those other things on your site. And I think if you do that, things have a way of really working out for themselves. So with that, Jamie, I'll stop and see if there's what those questions were earlier.
All right. Then we'll see if we got some online and somebody else might have. I got 3 wrote down here.
All right.
Question number 1. What is the best thing to use on a coastal field to get rid of silver blue stem?
Good luck with that. I don't think that you're going to have much luck with that, because when I was doing some KR blue stem management studies, and I was, spraying different things and trying different things to help manage the KR blue stem, one of the things that kept escaping all of my herbicides was silver blue stem. And so, the question is, number 1, what's fertility level in the Bermuda grass? Because there's no better deterrent for any of these weeds than a good, healthy stand of Bermuda grass. And if it's not being fertilized appropriately, then that starts to open some areas up for other things to move in. And silver blue stem is very aggressive. I mean, it'll move right on in there. It's kind of like Bahia grass over here in East Texas. If the Bermuda grass is not really well fertilized, then Bahia grass just sets up. And they have a competitive advantage because they come from seed. And so if you get a little open canopy in the Bermuda grass and you get a little moisture, then suddenly you've got seed germinating from all manner of species. I would also ask if the silver blue stem is located in a colony somewhere, then I think it's easier to go in there and try to destroy that with Roundup, and then maybe think about reestablishing the Bermuda grass or whatever. But if it's just routinely scattered across the pasture, I'd ask Bob Lyons to weigh in on this if he's got any thoughts about that. But there's some grasses that we can take out of grasses effectively, but many times we don't have that herbicide that helps us to manage all grasses out of Bermuda grass. Bob, you got any comments on that?
Not a lot, I guess. Maybe one approach might be a rope wick.
If you could find a time that the silver blue stem was taller than the Bermuda grass, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, taking the grass out of a grass is pretty tough.
It's always difficult.
And I mean, I don't know. Maybe it depends on the grazing preference that they had. If they preferred the Bermuda over the silver, then it's not going to work. But if they preferred the silver over the Bermuda, you might graze it out.
Yeah. So, Jamie, I completely failed on that question. So have you got an easier one?
We'll try it. Let's see what the next one brings. What is the best product to use on coastal fields where there are sensitive plants around the perimeter, like across the fence line, for example, a grape vineyard?
Well, and given the fact that the grape producers are getting together on a class action lawsuit. It's targeting the chemical companies, not other growers at this point in time. I would just suggest that you need to be very, very careful which way the wind is blowing, and make sure you document those things, because if you don't have good documentation, and if you're surrounded by vineyards, there's nothing you can spray because these grapes are very, very sensitive just about to everything. And so I would just be very careful. If they're just downwind with a south wind or southwest wind, I would wait until I got a little change and maybe a little cool front move through, and you had like just a day or two of maybe some winds out of the north, and then go do it. But other than that, and some of your people right there may be growing grapes. I may be in vineyards as well, but the vineyards have become quite a challenge, especially in the high plains where we grow cotton. I mean, you can imagine going up there and putting 20 acres of vineyards in right adjacent to a cotton field. I mean, somebody's asking for trouble. And so I know of no effective herbicide that would help you with that. The only thing that you'd still have to be awfully careful, but you might consider Pral H2O as a pre-emergent, because you're going to apply that during a time that the grapes are not growing well or growing at all. And, that might be something that you could use as a tool. Now, it's not going to get anything that's perennial out there, but if you're going to have a bunch of weed seed germinating coming up and you'd like to spray 2,4-D or Graze On Next or something like that, maybe the pre-emergent might be the route to go.
Okay, next question. What's your opinion on plowing a coastal field to get it to spread and thicken up?
We've never.
And so, when do you do it?
We've never done that.
In doing it, you don't think it works?
No. I mean, the people that know the most about Bermuda grass have not done that. And I'm talking about from Glenn Burton on. And
Okay.
so, Dr. Burton gave us coastal in 1943. The guy knew more about Bermuda grass than anybody on earth. But we also had Ethan Holt at Texas A&M, who was a contemporary of Dr. Burton. And then we've had Dr. Roquette, who's been using Bermuda grass at the Overton Center for 50 years. And nobody.
What about aerating it?
Well, I don't know. I think it depends on, number one, it depends on your soil type. And so if you're out there, you're in Llano or Mason County, and you're on some of those really, really deep sandy type soils, those granitic sands, it's not going to help you one bit. Now, if you're on something that's a heavier textured soil, let's say it's a heavy clay, you're down a valley where a bunch of the clay particles have washed off eons of time down into the valley, and you have a history of maybe farming that, you've created a plow pan, or maybe you just had a tremendous amount of foot or hoof action in there when it was wet. If you actually have surface compaction, then it would make a big difference. And the way you can determine surface compaction is, everybody understand what a plot flag is? It's a little thin wire, an orange flag or something blue or red, whatever it might be, that we used to mark, plots, or maybe the electric company comes out of water and they put those flags in the ground to show where the line is. If you wait, say 24 hours after a good 1-inch rain, and you go in there and you stick that plot flag down in that clay soil, and you feel a certain level of resistance, and then about 2 or 3 inches, all of a sudden it gets easier, guess what? You've got surface compaction, and you don't need an aerator. If you have one, fine. But if you just have a tandem disc, that's all you need to do is disrupt the surface so that moisture can infiltrate versus running off. But if you're out there on a lot of those sandy soils, like I'm familiar with out there, it would not do one bit of good.
Next, is it productive to burn a hayfield each year? Burn it off?
I don't know about productive. I think there are some reasons to burn hay fields. The biggest reason would be, well, there's two, I guess, reasons. One is you can control a lot of winter annual weeds, and so it helps make that first hay cutting fairly clean. You can also do the same thing with glyphosate, you know. The other reason is, and I don't know that you need to do it every year, but every few years, you know, you get a pretty good thatch down there, and you can get maybe some insects, maybe some fungal diseases or something that can sort of overwinter, you know, set up housekeeping down in that thatch. And so every once in a while, it's not too bad an idea to do that. But, you know, so there's a short-term benefit. You know, we all understand that if you burn that off, you get an immediate return of the phosphorus and potassium to the soil right there, and a little bit of the nitrogen. Most of the nitrogen goes up in the smoke, but you'll get an immediate return of P and K. And then if you get moisture right away, you'll have this early flush of growth, but it's a short-term thing. And then it goes back to where it would be normally. And if you're not careful to manage that area differently, the cattle will move in there and they will hammer that area. So you have to be able to fence those areas off and then manage the cattle. If you want to turn them in and let them take advantage of that lush new growth earlier in the spring, sure, I mean, you can do that. But as far as a long-term benefit, I don't think you could find anybody that would tell you that there's a real long-term benefit to it.
Okay, next is mowing your field near the end of the year. Is that a good thing to do to help with your soil fertility and structure and compaction?
No, I don't think that's going to have any impact on any of those things that you just mentioned. Some people like to mow them because in the spring, when you start having green up, if you don't have all that standing dead up there, you know, a lot of people think that, you know, their new grass and new growth is going to be easier. It's going to come up easier and all that. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, you think about rangelands that have never been mowed at all, and they green up just fine with standing dead on them every year. I mean, it's just, you know, now for cosmetic, aesthetic purposes, if you want to clean that up. But I would prefer to graze that myself rather than shred it, because you can make some pretty good use of that standing forage out there. You know, those guys on the rangelands used to do, they put them out there on that dormant, warm season grass and feed a little cake, and those cattle did just fine through the winter, you know. But I never like to mow, almost under any circumstance. So I'd say no.
Next, how do you control grass burrs in a coastal field? What's your best options?
Okay, so we've got three options there, and none of them are real good. But let's start with Prowl H2O, pre-emergent, that would go out, say, in January, early February. It goes out in the dormant season. You're going to put about 3 quarts per acre out, which certainly adds to the cost of growing hay in that pasture. But it could be important, especially if you're selling that into the horse market or something like that. Now, the next thing has to happen is you need to get about 1 inch of rain within 2 weeks to water that in, so that you get that layer herbicide down the soil that's going to impede that, you know, those plants from being able to, you know, germinate and get up through that layer of herbicide. And I usually tell people that Saturn and Mars then have to come into perfect alignment. And, you know, if you get all that done, then yeah, you can have season-long control of grass burr and probably 100 different other things that come up from seed. So that's one option. The other option is to use Pastora. And so Pastora has to be applied. Now, this will be a post-emergent. So Prowl H2O is pre-emergent. Post-emergent is Pastora. And you've got to be able to identify a seedling grass burr. So that thing, you've got to apply that when that grass burr is no more than 1.5 inches or 2 inches tall. And so there's a caveat there. You know, they germinate all through the year, seems like. And so when are you going to apply the Pastora? But if you apply to the seedling, it will destroy the seedling grass burr. And it also controls a whole bunch of other, you know, there's over 100 plants on that Pastora label. And so, you know, that's another option. It's also sort of pricey. It's an ounce of Pastora, and I don't know what it's selling for today. I mean, probably 18 bucks or something like that. And then there's the third option. And the third option is to apply Roundup. And the Roundup should be applied at 10 to 12 ounces per acre. So have everybody repeat that, 10 to 12 ounces per acre. And that's got to be under really good growing conditions. Because here's what will happen. If you got good soil moisture and you go apply that 10 to 12 ounces out there, the Bermuda grass is going to look a little sick for a few days. But after about a week or so, it's going to start to come roaring back. In a couple of weeks, you won't even be able to tell that you ever touched it. At the same time, all the annuals in the pasture are dead. And so that's one way to handle grazing pastures. Glyphosate can also be used in hay meadows, but there's another dang caveat on that. So you can apply a pint of Roundup per acre within 7 days of hay harvest. All right, now think about that. Within 7 days of hay harvest, you got to get the grass cured, get it raked, get it baled, and get it hauled out of there, and then apply your pint of Roundup. The reason that works is the Bermuda grass doesn't have any leaves, because most everybody scalps the Bermuda grass for hay harvest when they shouldn't, but that's a different story.
What about plateau on a coastal field getting rid of birds?
Do what now?
Plateau?
Well, yeah, plateau does a great job, except you're gonna stunt the Bermuda grass for anywhere to 6 to 8 weeks. I've lost 2 hay crops putting out 6 ounces of plateau. It's a great product. I mean, I've put that stuff out on grass burrs before, and just in a grass burr field, and you don't have another grass burr the rest of the year. I mean, it kills them and nothing else comes up. But you are sacrificing Bermuda grass. And that's why, when they first came out with it, they thought that was going to be the cat's meow. But then the hay guys started complaining, said, man, you cost me a hay harvest. You cost me 2 hay harvests. And so plateau's a great product for grass burrs, but it's pretty tough on the Bermuda grass. Doesn't kill it. Well, I can't say it doesn't kill it, because I've never seen it put on under some really dry conditions. It might, but that's the reason plateau didn't really sell that well. They have another product like that called Journey, and Journey's a combination of plateau and glyphosate. And it might at a low rate might be another option that you could use, but straight up glyphosate in a meadow, grazing meadow, works really well as long as your sprayer is properly calibrated. So you're putting out 10 to 12 ounces and not 2 to 3 quarts. And you have to have good growing conditions. So there's ways to manage grass burrs. Fertility also helps a lot, because if you've got a really thick forage system in that Bermuda grass, and a little grass burr germinates and he's coming up looking for sunlight, and he can't find any sunlight because you got a really vigorous, healthy Bermuda grass stand. Again, that's one of the best deterrents to weeds.
Pre-emergent right quick.
Yeah, it's Prowl H2O.
Prowl H2O.
Correct.
We have some fields that we've planted for deer grazing, and they're just covered now with weeds. Just wondering how to treat those weeds.
So what did you plant for the deer? Was it a grass or a dicot?
No, it's lab.
Oh, okay, lab. All right. So, and are the weeds broadleaf or is it grassy weeds?
Thistles and that type of thing.
Okay. Well, you're out of luck. Because again, just like we were talking about taking a grass out of a grass, it's really tough to take a broadleaf out of a broadleaf. And so, again, back to Dr. Lyon's suggestion earlier, if you're looking and the thistle is taller than the lab, then you might could use some sort of either a rope wick or one of those carpet rollers or something like that and go across the top. But other than that, it's going to be tough to manage those. If it was grass, we could do that. I mean, we've got, grass weed herbicides that we can use on lab, but there's nothing there. And the thistle's unfortunate because the deer are probably not going to make use of that. If it was something else, if it was like ragweed, for example, deer love to graze ragweed or browse ragweed. And so, if there was a different kind of a weed, then maybe it wouldn't be all bad. It could just be part of the food plot in total. But thistles, they're a little tougher.
Hey, how do you get rid of sedge on rangeland?
I know how to do it in Bermuda grass, but I'm just not sure. And I would again ask Dr. Lyons to help me with this. There's a product called Outrider that Valent sells. It used to belong to Monsanto that does an outstanding job on all kinds of sedges. I did that work initially for Monsanto, but I keep thinking it used to be a Bermuda grass only label, but I'm thinking there's something different about the Valent label that you might could use it in other places. And so if Bob is not familiar with that, Jamie, get somebody to look up the Valent Outrider label and see. There's something in my mind tells me that they may have changed that so you could use it in places other than Bermuda grass.
Say the Outrider?
Outrider.
Looking it up, we're going to go to the next question. At our ranch in Llano County, we are overrun with little yellow flowers at this time of the year, and then the flowers are gone and it's so dry and no grass is growing. How can we get rid of the yellow flowers, which there's a ton of different varieties of yellow flowers. So.
Yeah, yellow is a pretty popular color for weeds. It is. I mean, I'm just wondering what it is out there. And again, I would ask Bob to help me with that. But I mean, it could be bitter sneezeweed. I don't know. It's a real popular yellow flower grass that we see on rangelands, during the
sneezeweed. We got Texas.
Yeah. If it's that one, and of course, you got to get that stuff early. And let's back up even before that. Is it a real problem? Or does it just look bad? Because if it's not influence or impacting your forage production, then, I wouldn't waste my time or money on it. But if it truly is, then, and if it is bitter sneeze or whatever it might be, you're going to have to get it much earlier in the season. And that means you got to get out there and really scout that field. Bob, what have you got?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is try to identify what it is.
Yeah.
And then I agree with you. I mean, it sounds like it's probably an annual. So treating it earlier before it has the flowers, when it's small. But I'd really suggest trying to get it identified, and then you can make a better assessment. Because like timing on some of these species is kind of important.
Yes, exactly.
By the way, Outrider is good to use on rangeland. clear.
Okay, they've changed the label then. So that would be the one that I would use, and it's usually 1 1/3 ounces per acre.
All right, next, what do you think of feeding cattle original native prairie hay?
Well, my question is, why would you do that? Because if we're cutting native plants for hay, we're going to change the plant species on that particular site over time. So let's pretend that there's some little blue stem or some big blue stem, or let's pretend there's some side oats grama. Let's pretend there's any kind of, you know, prairie or native forage grass out there. The tall grasses should not be cut or grazed below 12 to 14 inches in height. And something like side oats shouldn't be cut any lower than about 6 or 8 inches. And so when you look at how we harvest hay and think about the height that we're cutting that, I mean, typically it's a 2-inch cutting height. And so what did we just do to those native plants? We have negatively impacted them. If we keep doing that, can you do that once and get away with it? Sure. But if you continue to cut native plants, you will change species that are on that site. I've talked to people who said, oh, we've been cutting our native hay meadow for 40 years. It's still native. Yeah, but it's not the natives you started with. And therein lies the danger. And the other thing is, what's the nutritive value of that hay? Typically, it's not very good. I know when I was growing up and raising, you know, had some horses, you could go down the feed store and you could get prairie hay or you could get Bermuda grass. There was always a big difference in price, you know, so there's a reason for that. If I was feeding my cattle, I would much rather feed them something that has the nutritive value to get them through the winter in good shape and not have something marginal over here. Because if I can get Bermuda grass hay, that's what I'm going to feed, because I get a better response to my fertilizer dollar. I'll get way more grass per acre than I can get out there.
And the spraying weeds such as nightshade or thistle cause them to be more desirable to cattle as they die.
There's some studies that have indicated that some of these weed species, that as we spray them, that there's a short time there that they actually do become more preferential, or cattle were more preferential in picking those things. But you know, I'd have to ask somebody else about specific things like, you know, the nightshade or the thistle. I just couldn't comment on that one, Jamie. I mean, I know that with some plants it occurs, but I don't know. Bob?
Well, the issue is with a toxic plant like the nightshade or you know, careless weed. You know, the general thinking is that they are more susceptible or more desirable after they get sprayed until they get dry, and so it's the toxicity that's the issue. The thistles, they're not toxic. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some like the yellow star thistle. That's toxic to horses. So I mean, yeah, I'd be careful with, if you know it's a toxic plant, I'd be careful with it. Make sure it dries before you give animals access to it after it's been sprayed.
Okay. All right. What are your thoughts on Prevathon versus Nuprid 4F for grasshoppers or armyworm control? What do you prefer?
Well, I don't know anything about that other insecticide that you mentioned, but it does on Prevathon would be.
You there?
Yeah, did you hear me?
Kind of cut out on us. Say that one more time quick.
I'm not familiar with that one insecticide that you mentioned, but Prevathon would be my first choice under any circumstance.
We got one more. One quick answer, Dale. Is it a good idea to fertilize cline grass and Bermuda grass one extra time in the fall?
The jury is out on that. You know, the turf industry always has this winterizer product that they recommend that people put out in the fall. We do not think it is a necessarily bad idea to apply phosphorus and or potassium in the fall before the grass goes dormant, so it can actually take it up and overwinter. Bermuda grass especially is susceptible to winter kill and some fungal disease problems if it's low on potassium. And so if you call our soil testing lab and ask that, or if you ask any agronomist, they'll say, nah, it's not necessary. We have seen we've done a few things with that, and we think it's not necessarily a bad idea. It is not our official position, but I don't see anything wrong with it, especially with phosphorus, because phosphorus just doesn't move very much in the soil. And so, you know, that's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and get that out there so that plant can start to, you know, take that up and then go through the fall and then be ready in the spring for the nitrogen once things, you know, get ready to go. But cline grass, if you're cutting cline grass for hay, I mean, again, it's just like anything else. You got to fertilize it. But if you're just grazing cline grass, I'm not sure that it's necessary to do any fertility. We've got a wealthy guy here close to us that owns 20-something thousand acres. He's a billionaire. They were planting lots of Bermuda grass until the fertilizer prices got really high. And what they've done is they've stopped and they have gone for grazing, they plant nothing but cline grass now. And this guy could afford to buy several fertilizer plants and companies. And his manager asked him all the time, how much fertilizer are you putting on your cline grass? He says, 0. Now, I did have a guy stand up at a meeting one time and tell me that he disagreed with that. And I asked him, I said, well, you tell me, what do y'all do as far as your fertilizer and your cline grass? He says, we fertilize the cline grass once every 10 years, whether it needs it or not. And I said, well, that's a good program. I like that. So if it's for hay, they got to fertilize it. If not, I would think again about fertilizing cline grass.
Okay. Well, Dr. Larry, I got one quick question. Was that picture you had on there of you and your dipstick, was that like last week or was that a couple years?
Oh, you're so kind. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was still pretty much a punk at that time. So no, that was many years ago.
That's good. Just had to get a little quick laugh in.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so very much for coming on today. Let's give him a round of applause. We certainly appreciate you and your knowledge and all you do to help us, Larry. So, Dr. Redmond, so we're very grateful and thank you.
Well, I appreciate your help out there with our Bennett programs, and I sent you a copy of my presentation if anybody was interested in it.
I got that. Well, we'll keep it at the office, and again, the whole deal's being recorded, so you could watch it again if you wanted to get online and do that, or we're going to have each one of their presentations, their PowerPoints. If you want to come, just call us. We can email it to you, mail it to you, or whatever, or come by the office and pick it up. So, all right, thank you.
All right, thank y'all. Thanks to Dr. Lyons for his help.
Yes, sir. All right, Randy, you on? Rolling. We got one more deal right quick. And while Randy is talking, the ladies in the back are going to give you an evaluation. Please fill that out. That helps us as a beef marketing or beef programming team to figure out what's best and figure out the best thing to do for next year. So if you would, please fill that out. And then the ladies will be in the back after Randy gets done. You can hand that to them, pick up your CEUs, and then also they'll have their lunch back there in the back too. So before that, we've got Randy Manius, who is up next, going to talk to us about our FSA programs. And all of you probably know Randy. He's out of the Mason office, does a tremendous job for him, and we're very grateful to have him come on today.
Thanks, Jamie. Let me see if I can start this video thing up. There we go.
Nice.
Can you see me?
Sure can.
That's just too bad. You're still gonna have to look at me. I'm not a loud talker, and this is the first time I've done one of these, so please bear with me. And I'm not a professional presenter like Dr. Lyons, Dr. Edmond are. I'm just kind of going to talk to you guys like I do when you come in my office and stuff. So just kind of hang in there with me and don't throw rocks at me or anything like that. I'm going to do the best I can. This COVID thing's kind of got everybody and everything kind of all messed up, and trying to run programs with this thing, it's been a challenge. I'll be real honest with you. I've got my office now in a phase 1 status, and we had an outbreak here in Mason County about 10 days ago. And so I got reverted back to a gating stage, which in short means that we're still not allowing producers in the office. I have all my techs pretty far spaced apart. I have, we're doing a lot of emails and stuff. When producers come to the office, it's mandatory that my techs wear masks when they come out to get signatures and things like that, simply for your protection. We kind of ask if you come to the office for a signature, if you wouldn't mind putting one on as well. Can't force you to do it, but just to keep everybody safe. But we were conducting business nowadays, because I know everybody's used to picking up the phone or coming in the offices. We have a drop can outside the front door here in my office in Mason for forms that are signed. We send you to sign and drop them off. We're doing a lot of email, a lot of regular mail. We doing some limited producer exposure. For example, if we need a signature on a form or something like that. Main thing I'm trying to tell you is that we're doing the best we can till we get through this thing. Just for, hopefully will never happen, but if you come out of the office and this thing is black and shut down, that means one of two things. That means that somebody in my office or in this building was exposed to COVID, and if that's the case, we'll be shut down 7 days. If one of my employees or somebody in the building becomes infected, we shut it down for 2 weeks. So bear with us. We'll have things in place that we can talk to you guys on the phone with computers and all that kind of good stuff. So we're kind of working on it. I want to talk to you guys about 3 things today, which are the most pending things. First off is the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, or CFAP, because you know we're all very much into acronyms in my agency and stuff like that. For immediate information, if you're computer savvy, I would recommend you go to farmers.gov and look at CFAP in there. That will give you some of the general eligibilities and the program requirements. What this program does is it's a result of market price declines from the beginning of the year caused by the COVID virus, which is unnaturally driven some of the markets down. Some of the things that are affected were cattle and dairy and hogs, lambs under 2 years, pigs under 120 pounds, no goats, no deer, just those, and then a bunch of specialty crops which are not applicable to our area really. This program is in 2 parts. It's part 1, and the reason there's 2 parts is because the money's coming from 2 different places. One's coming from the 2.2 trillion that Congress appropriated under PEERS, and the other part's coming out of CCC, which is our bank. So the first part, and I'm not going to get too much into this because I have another way to explain this better on, but the first part, we want to start with an inventory of your livestock as of January 15th of this year. Then from January 15th to April 15th, I need to know of that livestock that you had on the 15th of January, which ones, what you sold. And we have different categories. We have your wool, of course, and then calves under 600 pounds, calves over 600 pounds, slaughter cattle, which are your feedlot cattle, cull cows and cull bulls and that kind of thing. And then all other cattle would be like replacement heifers, or some guys are in the bull selling business and that kind of stuff. There's kind of a category, and each of these parts has a different payment rate. The because of this COVID thing, what I've done is I have gone in and built a worksheet that is in more layman's terms or general terminology than what I have to read and present. So what I did is I have this worksheet hanging outside my front door here in Mason, and Fred Raina with the NRCS in Llano has been kind enough to, and Jamie's been helping him out too, leave these worksheets out for you guys to pick up. Pick up that worksheet, read it, fill out the blanks on the two parts, and then send it back into the office. Once we get it back in the office, then we will contact you if we have any questions. If you're lacking some subsidiary information like an adjusted gross income statement or anything like that, and then we'll contact you as far as getting a signature on the application. Now, once we have your signature, turnaround payment time is like less than 3 days. So this is a pretty quick turnaround program. So we're getting them out pretty quick. But those worksheets are available in front of my office and with Fred down at NRCS or in the ag building down there in Llano. And I want to thank Jamie and Fred for helping us out with this deal. I think those guys are fantastic over there, and I've been very fortunate to work with them. They just been, we've always kind of worked pretty well together, and kudos to you guys. But fill out the worksheet, send it back in. We can email it to you if you need to. And I know that I don't have slides like Dr. Redmond, Dr. Lyons do. So if you need to call the office, there's my phone number. I hope you can read it. But it's easy to find. Talk to one of my techs. If you need to email something in or they need to send something to you. If you are a regular customer of ours, we've got all your subsidiary, your eligibility info is ready to go. Shouldn't take much of a turnaround. If you're a new producer, it'll take a little longer. We'll have to establish you and get you set up in the system and so on and so forth. There's no acreage report. There's no lease requirement, none of that sort of stuff. This is a kind of a producer certification program. And the penalty, or not the penalty, but if you report incorrectly, there's no adjusted program application. It's a refund of the entire amount. Not good. Pretty severe. So I know people make mistakes. I have several things in place to catch mistakes. If we see something that we think may have been a mistake, we'll contact you and double check that these numbers are correct. Because it's on the honor system, I think these safeguards are important. So be careful when you fill out that application. The payment rate is going to be at 80% of the entire payment at first, and the 20% is to be issued later if it's deemed necessary, whatever that means. So I've heard from friends of mine upstairs that they intend to issue the additional 20% by the end of August, and there's actually talk of somewhat of another program similar to this coming in after August. The deadline to apply is August 28th of 2020. And once you apply, you have 30 days to finish it, which means if we need additional information from you, like an AGI or something like that, we have 30 days to get you finished up. But we have a quick turnaround once that thing comes in here. We've been paying them within about 3 days. Where to file? Of course, if your ranch is in Llano County, you got to come over here. Your ranch is in Mason County, you got to come over here. But if you're multi-county, you have a ranch in Mason County, in Gillespie County, and Blanco County, then one of those 3 counties is what we call recording county or your administrative county. It's where you file all your basic paperwork. You go into that office and you file one application for all 3 counties or however many counties you're in on that one application. There's no need to go to each county office to file. In fact, you can only file in your recording county. So in that example, for me I have property in Blanco, Gillespie, and Mason, but Mason is my recording. So in that example, I would file in Mason County and for everything. And again, just be careful, excuse me. Just be careful when you fill out that worksheet. If you have questions, of course, call us. We're always here for you guys. Second thing I want to move on to is the livestock feed program. Most of you guys know that 19 was a pretty tough year as far as our drought conditions went. Both Mason and Llano County triggered for 4-month payment, which is pretty severe last year. And the drought carried into the fall and winter of 19. And on the 1st of January, Llano County carried into 2020 with a D3 drought rating, which automatically triggered the feed program for Llano County. Now, we started out with that program when we finally got permission to start it about mid-January. And we've got a pretty good response, but only about half of you guys have signed up so far. So if you don't think you've signed up for this thing, call us and we can check for you real quick. On that one, that's the program that you guys know from last year, that we need your acreage report. We need your inventory of your livestock as of January 1 of 2020. And of course, with the acreage reports, if you lease any land, we'll have to have verifiable lease statements on file for that stuff. It's kind of a new change from last year. The 18 Farm Bill put that in there. So those are the things on that feed program that you kind of need to be aware of. Llano is eligible for a 3-month payment or payment factor of 3. They don't use month terminology anymore. But the 3-month payment factor for the program is pretty good, pretty considerable. Again, that feed program is now permanent legislation with the 14 Farm Bill, and it is triggered based on the U.S. Drought Monitor, depending on the number of weeks that you go as a D2 or D3 or D4 and all that sort of thing. But it's an automatic trigger now. We don't need, it's not an ad hoc, as they call it, which is where the Congress has to go and appropriate money for it every year. It's in there every year now, based on the drought monitor and all that sort of thing. The last thing, or the second, one other thing before I go to that, your farm records, just as a reminder, you regular guys that are in here, if you buy another piece of land, or if you sell a piece of land, or you pick up another lease on something, I would recommend that you let us know right away. And just know that if you lease another piece of land, we're going to have that lease statement. And I know 90% of you guys do handshake deals, and that's just fine. But there's a statement I got to have signed by that landowner that is, he's verifying that you are actually leasing that farm and that you're eligible for program payments that deal with acreages. Okay. The feed program deadline is end of December. So be thinking about that. Okay. 2019 NAP grass grazing losses. Llano came in this week and they are eligible for a 2019 NAP grass grazing payment. For some reason, no contiguous counties or surrounding counties of Llano are eligible. Mason didn't make it in. Sensaba didn't. Gillespie didn't. Burnett didn't. McCullough did not. For some reason, Llano just made it in. It's at a 60% loss on native and 65 on improved. So we're still in the process of getting approval to begin issuing payments, which I would think that probably we'll start issuing those about mid-August. Some of you guys who are not familiar with the NAP program, just a quick shout. NAP, if you gain a sizable amount of your annual income from ranching, I would strongly suggest that you look at the NAP program. It's just kind of a cheap insurance on your grasses out there. It costs $325 a year, whether you have 300 acres or 3,000 acres. It's the same fee. And of course, we have some other exceptions to that rule to get you in the program. But, you know, if you have a business that's selling cars or something, you can buy insurance on everything. In the ranching business, you can't buy insurance on your business, so to speak. So think about it as a risk management tool. That's what most of my guys do, and it's been pretty good for them. But going forward into 2021 NAP, It's like an insurance policy. You have to buy coverage and apply before the coverage period begins, which is January 1 to December 31st for the calendar year. So we're going to start taking 2021 NAP applications probably around the 1st of September. I have to be through by December 1st. That's a pretty good period, and we'll do them all by appointment. That process works good for us because I don't like running you guys back and forth 5 or 6 times a year when I can knock it all out in one sitting with you. So with COVID, I don't know how it's going to be handled this year, probably different than before, but just keep that in mind that we're going to start it here in about 60 days. I'll send you guys a postcard out. It's going to have a red important stamped on it just to kind of get your attention and that sort of thing. So be kind of looking for that. Like I said, we're going to start in September, be wrapped up by December 1st is my deadline. We're going to do it by appointment. And again, I would seriously recommend if you're sizable or if it's a main part of your annual income, ranching is, I think you should look at that program pretty seriously. That's about it for me for program stuff. So with that, I've only got one last thing I want to tell you guys. I wish I could be there in person. I always enjoyed visiting with Jamie and Fred and all my producers and stuff around there. It seems like I answer more questions that day than I do in 6 months sitting in this office. I hope you understand that I'd be there if I could. I think those guys over there are phenomenal with this program. I send people from Blanco, Gillespie, Kimball, Mason over that thing to this field day every year because it's so good. And I attend, I don't know, several of these every year, and this by far is the best one. I think it's just great. But before I go, I want to thank a few people. With the NRCS, Fred and his staff, been great to work with you guys for years, and Jamie and your staff extension has been fantastic. Lucky to work with all those guys. We've all got 3 different agencies with 3 different responsibilities, but we've always been there to help each other out, whoever needs a favor or something like that. My current county committeeman in Llano was Gary Bauman and Elaine Smith. Fantastic committeemen. They're very conservative, very intelligent. Past ones, Curtis Osborne, Walter Wallace, Jennifer McMillan, Mary Ruth Wallace, Glenda Roberts are all former COC members who I really do appreciate them. The last thing, I guess, and this is going to probably make some of you guys really happy, but come next week, Friday, the 31st of July, I intend to resign my directorship as the CED for Mason and Llano counties. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are happy to see me go, and I hope there's never any personal issues. I've always tried to be as fair and honest with you guys as I can. Unlike Dr. Lyons, I am not postponing my retirement. I've been working on this for a while. For what it's worth, my first grandson is due in about 3 months, and I intend to spoil him as bad as anybody can spoil a kid. Some people have asked me, how can I, leave the agency now with CFAP running and a feed program running and NAP and everything else? And my response has been, I jumped on this train 30 years ago and it was running 100 miles an hour and it hadn't slowed down yet. So I'm going to jump off now and hit the dirt and hope for a good landing. But I just wanted to let you guys know, with this size of an audience, with this COVID thing going on, that I've appreciated all of you guys working with you. And I know sometimes it's not always been favorable. You haven't been real happy about everything. But I hope you understand that it was business and not personal, and that I've always had the best outlook for my producers. It always came first. And I'll let you know when I go to trainings and stuff, I am one that stands up and argues and complains about things that they come up with for you guys. I don't ever win, but I do argue for you guys. So Jamie, I'm done, but in all sincerity, to all the guys that are sitting out there and all the guys watching online, I just want to tell you thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys down the road.
Let's give him a round of applause right quick. From us at Llano, Randy, we just want to tell you thank you for your years of service and all the work that you've done for us. And from our agencies to the independents, to the producers here in Llano County, you've done us a great service and been very helpful for many years. And we just want to tell you thank you for that opportunity. Very grateful to you for that. And we want to tell you good luck and have fun with that grandbaby.
I intend to. Thanks, guys.
Sir, see ya.
See ya.
Here online about CEUs. Once the program is over, Marty is going to send us a list of everybody that needs CEUs of you that are online, and we will get that certificate mailed to you. You guys that are here, we have the certificates in the back. So that does it for our programming. One is, does anybody know Billy Bearden? Can you go back there and talk to Miss Karina about your, I think your number has something on it or something messed up with it.